Not mute.
Heather, go home.
And now the meeting is live on YouTube and live on Zoom.
Meetings live and. Okay. All right.
So right now,
Yeah.
it's a couple minutes behind, but right now you are live on YouTube.
Thanks, appreciate it.
That's what people are seeing right now on YouTube.
Okay. Be here in person. Oh, is that right there?
Yep, and they can hear us because we're muted, we're unmuted right now.
I see your person.
I'd probably mute us again, just the people. Hello, Jaikar or Ted, can you say something and make sure we can hear you?
Hi, yes, this is exciting, our first multi platform meeting.
Hello,
Yeah.
yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
Everything sounds good.
And I-
Ted, can you hear us, Ted?
I got you guys, yes.
Okay.
Are you looking for the Wi-Fi password?
Yes.
It's the Millis or B&B guest and then Sandpoint with a capital S and a capital P. You're welcome. So as you saw when Ted, if you're speaking, we can't hear you right now.
We heard him.
I'm not.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay. So they can hear us, we can hear them. So the sound is controlled by over
They
here.
hear these two guys then?
They'd have to speak loud for them because the mic is up here.
When you wanna come up and speak, you gotta come up there.
Yeah,
Is Jack Hart joining us remotely or?
yeah, she's remote.
Yeah.
So the sound is a little soft here for people in the audience to hear. I've never done it unless we're in a full meeting, so it's been a little different. Let me just try to. Oh, I'm here. I was hearing something. It was me.
But you see they come up here if they speak on something, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying is just for them hearing, like, for example, Jaikar speaking.
Okay.
We could hear her fine, but I don't know if how well they could hear in the back. You could?
Okay.
Okay.
This screen.
Only when they're speaking, so like right now, Ted's name is up there, but only because he was the last person. Oh, that's black? I'm sorry. Then you should, yeah.
They're behind the curtain.
Yeah. Full screen any second now. And
Oh,
go full screen. Why don't you go full screen now? So when they speak, you'll see the video and right now it's showing Ted because he was the last one to speak. So that's the only reason you're seeing him up there. I just noticed some other issues because sometimes we'll have the panel showing on the screen and then whoever speaks. The problem is when it goes back to the panel, I don't know if you've ever watched our select board meetings, sometimes somebody will sit there and speak. But because the video is on the screen, the camera will actually go up to the video because they're moving. Even though the person down here is speaking. So, but if we leave a name up there, then it doesn't matter. So you guys are ready to do your meeting whenever you're supposed to, however that works?
Okay. I call to order the Board of Health meeting of Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. Do I have a second?
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, so welcome to our initial first foray into having our meetings be streaming on YouTube as well as live. They have been live through Zoom, but not live through a multi platform presentation. So this is exciting. And I want to offer congratulations to our new / returning member of the board, Matt. Congratulations and great to have you back. Yay. And I wish I was there, but I'm not. So I'm like, I didn't get the memo. But this will be good. This will be our opportunity to kind of figure out how to work the system with
I'm
remote
trying right now.
in person. So one of the requests I will make tonight, because it's going to be even more important as we expand, hopefully, our scope of viewers, is when you speak tonight, please put yourself on audio as well as video, and identify who you are. If you're representing an agenda or here for a specific agenda, if you're representing a role in that agenda, whatever, so that people who are watching this will understand kind of how you fit into the discussion. You're welcome to go back, into not being on video, but while you are speaking, please introduce yourself, introduce your role or your relevance, and then, proceed to speak. And again, this is our, inaugural experience with this, so we're probably going to be tweaking as we go along. So questions, if we have questions within, us doing this, this will be, I'd rather people ask questions than, feel like they don't know what's going on. So tonight we have for an agenda, and we're actually good. We have our first agenda was the YouTube streaming of meetings, which we just engaged. Do we have any questions or comments about that before we leave this agenda? Okay, moving on to the next agenda, which is Regency Glen Allen Pool. I believe, and John, can you confirm, John McVeigh, Board of Health, that the Regency Glen Allen participants for this agenda wanted to move this agenda to our next Board of Health meeting. Is that accurate?
Correct, that's correct. They canceled this meeting and said they could do June 2nd.
Okay. Okay,
So
great.
They could do June 2nd, yeah.
Okay. Great. So we will put that on the agenda for our next meeting, which is June 2nd. Okay, moving on to the next agenda, which is Regency Glen Allen irrigation well and pond. And I think, Ted, you are representing that agenda?
Yes, Ted Merchant, Land Development Director with Toll Brothers. We had also reached out to continue this item to your next agenda, if that's possible.
Is there any objection to that from my other board members? Okay.
Nope.
So we will move that agenda to, you want the June 2nd meeting as well, Ted?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Consider it done. Well, this is the way to do a meeting, huh? Just move everything to the next meeting. The next, let's see, the next agenda is final well regulation changes. And who's going to introduce this agenda? Is that going to be you, John McVeigh?
Sorry, was it
final well regulation changes?
Final well regulation changes? Yeah, we have that on this, you said they have it on here. Let's see. No.
I can't get on the box on my.
So this is the well regulations that were added. Used to be the old regulation 1991, and we did a let's see. We did amendment May 21st, 2015, 2025. And it has to do with the irrigation mostly.
Joe, did you have the other one I was sent?
Yes, it's on another part to the
Oh.
Dropbox. You know, we're saying that it looked a little bit like it was too much for tonight to go over. But we could go back at some point in time in the future and look at those.
Well, we can discuss it tonight.
Yeah. So,
We could put a part in red.
Fred,
6 point.
yeah. It is 6.3. Yeah.
7.4. So the proposed changes, irrigation drinkable wells may be tested for PFAS contamination upon initial establishment and every 5 years thereafter. 20 PPT for drinkable well and 50 PPT irrigation. Results then filtration in section 8 for consultants.
I like the first sentence. I'm a little confused by the other two.
The second sentence needs to be edited.
What they had, you need,
I'd be establishing a limit, or was that a limit? What is that?
Okay, can you hear me?
yes,
Up there, no, up there.
yeah,
Up in the cloud.
yeah,
Jagcar, can you hear him?
No, not really.
we can, maybe come up to this, yeah, I see it, yeah.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, now I can't see the screen, but,
Excuse me, is this Ethan?
yeah.
Come up here.
Okay, can you identify yourself, please, for
Sure,
people?
It's Ethan Mascoot. Actually, we'll come around so you can see us. How about that? And also I have a
Yeah.
student with me. So we'll both identify ourselves. All right. It's such a big crowd here. We don't have any seats.
Yeah.
I just think we got here early. All right.
I know, you got the squeaky chair.
Oh, no, not the
I
squeaky
moved that
chair.
over.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that.
Not the squeaky chair.
Yeah.
All right, my name is Ethan Mascoop, and I've been working on an interim basis here in the health department. And I have with me a student from Boston University School of Public Health, and if she can identify herself.
Yep, I'm Danielle Parture.
Okay, she's been working, among other things, looking at some of the files here in the office and doing a review of them. So briefly on the regulations, I had some comments on them. This particular paragraph that John is showing right now, I would make, John and I talked about this. I have some comments about this paragraph. One is I would change that first sentence from may be tested to shall be tested if you're going to approve that section, because may could be, well, whatever you want to do. It's either it's a requirement or it's not, or it's advisory. And again, I leave that up to the board. I spoke with John earlier today. I'm not in agreement with one standard for drinkable water and another standard for irrigation. I don't think that would be necessarily very helpful. I would keep it both the same. And for irrigation wells, I think the issue, particularly the issue for a large complex system, I know we're not going to talk specifically about Glen Ellen, but something like that, the standards would not be very much applicable because we would look at something like a risk assessment, which I'm happy to talk about a little bit later. But I think right now, since all the other standards are based upon drinking water standards, I think it'd probably be wise to leave that for the drinking water standard as well, which is 20 parts per trillion, rather than differentiate between the two. Because I don't have any science behind that would suggest that irrigation water would be less or more hazardous than drinking water. So that's my recommendation on that paragraph. But I would change regardless, if you do want to approve that, I would change that from wells may be tested to wells shall be tested.
I do that here right now.
But again, that's up to the board. This is what you have in front of you. There's other recommendations. I'm sure you had a chance to see this, but I want to go back to the definitions on the first page, if we can.
Do you want your,
It'd be
one of the
helpful.
things that you
Yeah.
have, okay, so I can bring that up, hold on,
Sure, it'd be
hold on a
helpful.
minute, so, let me get them here.
Do you have another version on Box?
Yeah, it's in, it's under,
Let me back up. As he's finding it, let me
Ethan
just.
Notes Wells for
Okay.
today. So you've got this right here, see this,
Okay.
Ethan email, and this is the one you, I think you're looking at.
Page 2, right?
Maybe.
This is,
If I may, the rationale behind these changes, again, I think it's important for anyone listening
so we're gonna put this.
as well to remind the board. The rationale behind this is that the goal is to rewrite the entire regulation in the near future over the next few months. And this is simply to capture irrigation wells and make it more clear or more specific that irrigation wells do come under the authority of the Board of Health. And that's why I suggested these changes. And John and I did talk about them, but as you see, sometimes we might have a difference of opinion. If you go back to the first page,
Yeah, this is right here,
is that the first page?
the red.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So
Yeah,
let me see if I can get this,
Great.
look at, I just don't know. Okay, there it is, I guess.
so among the changes that I recommended, it clarified the private wells and semi-public wells are any wells. You'll see that in the first two paragraphs. It's not showing quite up there. And it's in an earlier version where you can see the redlining. I don't know why the redlining was taken out, but I tried to clarify the language, would suggest the board members read it carefully so that there's no, that it's clear that a private well also includes a irrigation well, and a semi-public well also would include an irrigation well. And then under irrigation wells, I wanted to make it clear that an irrigation well shall include its entire distribution system, including but not limited to holding tanks, ponds, pipes, and discharge systems. In other words, just like the Board of Health oversees the entire distribution system from a drinking water, a well supplying drinking water. So as you take tests at the faucet, you also make sure that the entire system is properly installed and properly maintained. The same would be true for the irrigation well system in this case. So that was the reason for that additional wording. Then on the next page,
Yeah, this is the permits and privates.
oh yeah, that's right there. That's the next page, number 2. I wanted to make it clear again that the irrigation wells also require permitting. So there, no private or semi-public water supply well or irrigation well shall be installed or altered or repaired until a permit has been obtained from the Board of Health. And then the rest of the rest of the verbiage is the same. But I also recommended changing the title for that chapter 2, so it's clear that irrigation wells are included in the permitting process. So some of this is just tightening up the wording. Those are the latest changes I made earlier today when I had a chance to read through.
There's other changes, but I think it's all incorporated in here without the redlining.
I think I had something, a comment on one of them.
Right,
I
so
think
further
it's
down,
here, it's
ah,
either this one here, or,
that was,
let me see if I can get the comment up, hold on a second.
I made a comment and I just
Well, let me
mentioned
see
it,
if I
yeah.
press that, did you get the comment or something?
Yeah, do that.
Well, the comment was simply, as I said before, I would recommend keeping it at 20 parts per trillion. Just keep one standard for
Okay, yeah.
both. If you go further down, if you don't mind. Here again, I don't think we need to have 20 versus 50 parts per trillion. I think it should be, if we're going to have a standard for drinking water, drinking supply wells, then that would be 20 parts per trillion, and that would mirror what the state is requiring, I believe. And go further down. Okay, oh, I'm sorry, go back up, John. And here, no, I'm sorry, go down, go down. Yeah, there we go. So in that paragraph there, I added some narrative that goes slightly back up, because it's that paragraph, there we go. Yeah. So here, I said that any private or semi-public well, including wells used for or intended for drinking water and or irrigation, drilled on or within 1,000 feet of a landfill, waste site, agricultural land use, recreational use, including but not limited to golf courses, playgrounds, parks, 21E sites, or similar uses, may be required to conduct water quality analysis of including but not limited to various contaminants. Again, and go further down, please, John. And there, I list a few more of those, such as insecticides and pesticides. And the testing protocol will be determined by the board upon review of each application and may be based upon the specific historical, current, or proposed land use of the location and use of the wells. So this is to capture unique situations that don't typically come before the board or come before the office. And then further down, if you can, here,
So this is a good one here, because
here,
this is where you have the peer review.
right. So again, I'm thinking about complex or complicated situations. It's a peer review consultant authority. And the board at its sole discretion may determine that a project size, scale, complexity, potential impacts, long-term monitoring, or compliance with the board's well regulations warrant the use of a peer review consultant, including but not limited to engineer, planner, lawyer, hydrologist, risk assessor, or other. Such consultant shall assist the board in review and comment prior to action by the board, and it goes on. This is similar to your ability to hire an outside consultant for the environmental health impact report. For example, because you don't have the capacity here on staff to handle that kind of work. So those are my major recommendations. And again, to back up on this, the reason for these is that my understanding has been from town council that there was a question as to whether or not the regulations were clear enough to include irrigation wells. So that was the purpose of this request for amending the regulations. I know, again, we're not talking about Glen Ellen, but I just want to mention that's part of, obviously, the complexity there. And it's many issues or many conditions or concerns. And it's not the only one that I think the board would come and would deal with over the next number of years. And what makes that site so complex is that it's prior land use as a dairy farm, as a farm, and also as a golf course. So it raises a number of concerns that I think the board needs the authority to address. So that in brief are the changes that I recommended. I think John made some others, if he can speak to that, or did I cover everything?
You covered everything, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if I, one last suggestion to the board members, I think it's important to, and I know you already know this, but I'll say it anyway. It's important to carefully read the wording and the narrative here. You can always change it again, even if you voted in today, you can change it the next meeting. You have that authority and power. That's because you have, it's within your authority. I don't say that's something you should do every meeting, but you have that authority.
Every 6 months.
Well, you can also put a sunset clause into this and say, it has to be reviewed by the Board of Health in a certain period of time. And if you don't, then that sunsets. It becomes null and void. I don't recommend that either in any portion of this regulation, but you have the authority to be as creative as you wish within reason on these regulations. And the regulations too, if you notice, were really last updated
92.
in 1992, which I will say that's a long time, given what we now know about water and things we've learned. From an archaeological perspective, that's just a very small moment in time, but from a science perspective, it's a huge timeline. And we've learned a lot more since the 1990s. And that's the reason for ultimately updating the entire regulation, hopefully within the next few months. Okay, I've said enough.
This is Jai Carr, Board of Health. So you both have contributed to this draft. And Ethan, you called out one portion of it that you and John differ. Is there any other place within this draft that you feel differently about what has been presented in this draft?
Speaking for myself, I'm fine with everything else in here for the purpose of amending the regulations for untemporary, until the full draft is ready for consideration. John, I can speak.
I think the only difference we had was the 50 parts per trillion in the irrigation. And you wanted to be at the 20, which puts it in the same area as the drinking well. So, maybe put it at 30. 30, right? I don't know.
I think it makes, I leave that to the board members to discuss, but my opinion right now is I would leave it consistent at one standard. But again, that can always change. And by the way, these standards are meant to change because you do tie it into DEP's regulation, 310 CMR 22 as well. And so the intent, I think, behind the original regulation was to have that somewhat fluid, to use a pun for water. Because knowing that those standards will change in the future. But I think I'm sorry, I think you can have that even more as, for the final draft of the regulation. I'm sorry, Jay Carr.
Oh, no, I didn't realize you hadn't stopped, so. So John, I would like to hear what for you would be the appropriateness of differentiating between the drinking well limit and the irrigation well water limit, so that the board members can know why you landed on that. Ethan's given us information about why he would land on what he's landed on, which is 2020. Can you talk to the board about why you would prefer 20 and 30 or 50, whatever?
Yes, yeah. I went into discussion with Glenn Ayers, the gentleman from the DEP. And this went over in that debate. And I think the issue would be that they haven't yet looked into what they call it? What was it? Sorry. They didn't come back with the irrigation, okay? And the reason one might, factor that is, if they don't do that, then they didn't think it was the same risk as drink water wells, because they never would at the same time go after those two. So to some degree, they were probably less risk. They thought there's less risk than the drinking water, because they didn't go at the same time. So that's part of the reason I think we could probably use 30, 40, 50 max as, something they could use to, view it as the area that you have to watch out for.
Okay, Ted Merchant, do you have your hand up for asking a question at this point?
I do, and maybe it's piggybacking a little bit off of John's comment in that it sounds like DEP hasn't addressed this because they don't see it as a risk. And I don't know that setting a higher limit I'm guess I'm playing both sides. To Ethan's point, we don't know what that number is, so it's hard to set. I would just like to make sure that there is an opportunity to provide that risk assessment to generate what that number should be or discuss with the board what that number should be rather than setting it as a hard number, not knowing what the risk is.
I think I have a similar question, which is, where does the 20 number come from? First off, is it some sort of toxicology or that sort of thing?
It's, I think, well, there's a couple of things going on here, if I may, and I'll also include an answer to your question. One is, I think DEP probably, and I can't really speak for DEP, I'm making an assumption that they haven't really dealt with irrigation wells because more people are drinking water than being exposed to irrigation wells. So I think their efforts are for what's of most concern, which is who's most impacted or who's most exposed or likely to be most exposed. That's number one. Number two is I believe the 20 PPT is based upon the current DEP recommendation for drinking water. So that's where that number comes from. And
Where does that
ultimately,
number for them come from?
this is, you know, I'm friendly with somebody who is on that group, but I'm not intimately involved as to, this has been years of study right now to come up with that assessment.
Yeah.
And Matt, I'd have to get back to you with some specific answers on that because I'm not that intimate with it.
Yeah.
Danielle might be, she's gonna be working on PFAS, or is it too early for you that?
No, I haven't actually started that work, but I mean, yeah, the Office of Research would have done a risk assessment on all the available data in the literature on it to come up with that number.
And I think, thank you, and I think also when it's for irrigation wells, as I'm saying, just to get a little bit more into the details, to do a risk assessment would not really be based upon what those standards are. It would be based upon, let's say, the cumulative impact or the cumulative exposure to a wide variety of, let's say, contaminants. It could also be based upon what their vulnerable populations might be exposed. It would be based upon how that risk assessment is conducted. It could also be through a linear or nonlinear exposure or risk assessment. So in other words, if it's nonlinear, then that would mean, or if it's linear rather, that would mean that there's no such thing as a safe level of exposure. But yet we do know that at times, you know, some contaminants are, we assume, are safe at certain levels of exposures, and they're not. Something that everyone agrees to now, and from science, for example, lead, there's no safe level of exposure. We don't even know if there's lead in this water here. We have no idea. But what I'm suggesting though is that these numbers help, particularly for drinking water, but for irrigation water, that's why I suggested, you know, a peer consultant review, because again, it really all depends. It depends on the population. You know, if you have elderly, if you have young, if you have children, if you have somebody who's medically at risk, these numbers could change, or the significance of these numbers or the importance of these numbers could change. And that's why the risk assessment would be helpful to help the board determine can or cannot be acceptable or permitted. But getting back to PFAS, that I can get back to you by the next meeting for more.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just curious in general, like, because it would help me understand, should we keep everything at 20? I don't know. I just don't know what the data says. Maybe 100 is okay. I just have no clue.
For PFAS, I think this, you know, I would have to defer to people on that in that division of DEP. I know some people there, and I can certainly get back to the board, or even have her perhaps even speak to the board either remotely or in person if it's of interest. But I think again for irrigation, I would just like to repeat, if I can, my guess is it's not that DEP is saying there is no risk from irrigation. I would imagine DEP is going for the most important exposure, which is everyone drinks.
Right.
Everyone drinks water, or exposed to water, and not everyone is exposed to irrigation wells or irrigation water. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Well, and it's really easy to just Google something, right? I'm seeing here that the EPA says 4 PPT
On something, yeah.
on some things, so I'm not suggesting that we get granular to every. On the other hand,
That looks like the civic.
Well,
that.
one of the
yeah,
things,
it is, yeah, I guess, but then I also see, just looking at your screen, summer 10,
Yeah,
I guess what
summer
I'm
10.
wondering is. I'm not saying we shouldn't trust Mass DEP, but I'm wondering if we need to do a little bit of digging ourselves, just to make sure maybe they're not behind and they should be updating as well.
I believe they are, but again, I can't speak to it in general. But one of the things I was gonna recommend, if, for example, let's say in the irrigation system with Glen Ellen, again, knowing that not on the topic, but for example, I was gonna recommend using PFAS method 1633 for testing, which is different than testing for drinking water. So it was looking at different kinds of, different parts of PFAS.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think, again, that hard number is really not that hard, particularly for irrigation right now.
Yeah.
Because there would be different levels of concern there. Again, I can hold off until next week's discussion or 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I don't know what everyone else thinks of. I would like to understand sort of where these numbers came from. Cause I also don't wanna have to every 6 months update them, because we could have looked into it ahead of time. And I know, Jaikar, you were really into this with Kathy years ago. I don't know if you know more about this, and I'd forgotten it all.
Oh, you mean the agenda of PFAS in the drinking water, or?
Yeah, and sort of how limits were set, and cause I kind of remember you having discussions either with lawmakers or with people associated with lawmakers about how that, I don't know, discussion was happening and evolving.
Yeah, and I think the operative word is evolving. And my theory is similar to Ethan's in terms of why there aren't more hard numbers for irrigation specific wells. It's, they're working most municipal bodies are going to work towards what's the maximum impact for, maximum citizens, and then kind of filter down, and less people are impacted by irrigation wells than are, for example, municipal water supply or private wells. I'm curious as to what, I know Jim McKay of the DPW, when he was putting together, the proposals for grants and funding for the water processing plants that we have updated, he had numbers that he was using in terms of what our plants had to meet. And that for me would be something that has a number that has been researched to the point of getting grant money, getting state funding for it, et cetera. I don't know what that number is. 3 years ago I knew what it was, but it's, relevant information comes and goes in my private computer here. And my sense of remembrance is it is closer to the 20 than it is, any of the other numbers that I've heard tonight. 22, 24. But, the point being well taken, which is with new science, with a lack of hard data, because it is new science, it is a new emerging issue, how do we set, a number that it seems fair on both sides, in terms of our concern as a board, but also fair to people who are, on the implementation side as well. The thing that I would like, just like Ethan said, we can amend anything the next meeting. I think the other flexibility that's important to put forth is, there's always absolutely the opportunity for an applicant to request a variance, depending on the situation, depending on the siting, et cetera. So it works both ways. If you've got a site that had heavy, potential chemical PFAS generating use, there's, going to be variance perhaps applied there. The same is true if you've got something that is the most pristine piece of property, and you can ask for variance there. Asking doesn't guarantee, but I think our track record is pretty high as a board for granting variances based on appropriate, data. So, and I must admit to a bias to tonight pass this portion just as a starter, because we have been working on this since what, December? So, I'm wondering if we can pass this with some number put in this disputed number. And I'm saying disputed as in, 20 versus 50 versus 30, with the caveat to ourselves and, on record, that there is some research done, contacting Jim McKay, asking what number he used, for what purpose, where did he get that number? So we can have a number, but so we can also have a document that has started to actually be realized versus pushing off again. That is, my suggest, but again, I'm one of 3 board members that have to vote on this one way or the other tonight.
I think in order for me to vote on it, I would have to understand where this 50 numbers comes from versus the 20 number. I'd also want to understand what the health effect of aerosolized PFAS is, which I cannot find any studies to say this irrigation well is going to cause a health effect because PFAS is there. It's, what is the aerosolized PFAS health effect on a human body? I've gotten none of that information. So how can we say this is a health problem or a health risk for the population to inhale like an irrigation system? How much is getting aerosolized? It's droplets. How far a spread? So there's a lot more science needs to go behind it for I would be comfortable voting on any sort of regulations or as numbers for PFAS and irrigation system sprinkling.
John or Ethan, do you have any sort of response to that concern?
I would say that, I understand what you're saying, but I think that would be addressed through a risk assessment. That's what the risk assessment task would be in terms of understanding what those numbers actually mean, the results of the sampling numbers would be. I think there's something else though here in public health. There's a principle called the precautionary principle that I think every student learns in the very first class. Do you want to explain what that is?
Something like that. Sure, that the precautionary principle is that you regulate to prevent the possibility of health effects developing rather than seeing what health defects develop and then regulating based on those findings.
Yeah, no, that's right. So I thank you. And I would say a classic example would be the tobacco industry, which they knew that tobacco was hazardous years and years ago, but we have to study it more. We have to study it more and we have to study it more because we still have to study it more. Because we still have more to study. And there's always more to study, but we already know that it's dangerous. And I think we know PFAS is dangerous. We know that it's harmful to health. Exactly through inhalation versus drinking. That's not an area that I'm an expert in, and I would have to go back to other people, but that's where the risk assessment would come in.
There's probably no studies of that, honestly, because it's just not a main mode of exposure, so.
That people are aware of.
That inhalation, yeah, I think people are only really studying oral exposure as far as I'm aware.
Well, and one question I have is there, within an irrigation system, there's the spray, but isn't there also then that spray does land somewhere and then gets put back into the water system because of subsequent rainfall? So I think it's kind of a twofer with an irrigation system. I mean, I'm just kind of thinking this, on my feet here. Again, the impact of it, how much, again, studies. And, I know we're all using the word data because that is for lack of a better way of saying it, it's a third party way of having information, right? It's not my opinion, it's not yours, it's there's research, there's time, there's consistency put into generating data. It reminds me a little bit of before that our town voted to authorize marijuana related industry and commerce. I was asked to do a research study for what were the health effects of marijuana. And ironically, what I found is there was very little data in the United States because it was an illegal substance at that point for anything. There were two sources of data. One was the US Army, which had been studying it for about 20 years, but those reports were hard to get with my security clearance. The other was Europe, which had legalized it a long time ago. So, but that didn't mean that, and now, almost 15 years after doing that paper, now I'm seeing reports and data and studies that are showing some of those same things that Europe had in their data 15 years ago, in terms of risks and side effects and stuff. So the data may not be here, and I think that's why putting anything into this portion of our updated regs will need to be done with prudence and with the clear realization that we are going to be updating these numbers as we get more data and we get more familiarity with what is truly PFAS issues. But I think if we wait for that data for the 10, 15 years, I don't know that that would have to be a conscious choice we make as a board. I guess I'd say it that way. And I can argue it either way, but tonight we're asking to land on a portion of a document as a start to move forward so as to start addressing this. And I really appreciate, Carol, you bringing that up as talk to me about the science. I'm not seeing it. I think that's a great, and important viewpoint.
Can I add one more piece to this? And that is, the risk assessment also would also look at the ecological risks. So for example, let's say, Jake Hart, you had mentioned taking PFAS from the groundwater and reintroducing it, let's say, into an area, which is probably not very advisable when we know about PFAS. But of even more concern, let's say there's a zone 2 for recharge area for public drinking wells, even more so there would be of a higher concern. And we know, for example, in that part of town, there is a zone 2 for Holliston wells. So those are parts as well. And the drinking water standards would not necessarily be applicable to a zone 2 and what you would be applying to that area, because that's a different level of risk. And it's not so much of a human exposure, but potential human exposure through drinking water of those wells. So it's a different way of looking at that exposure pathway. And from DEP and I'm almost sure DEP and their regulations have even more strict rules and regulations regarding introducing contaminants into a zone 2 or a zone 1 for that matter, obviously for a public supply drinking water, public water supply system. But that would also be looked at through, or maybe depending on what the requirements would be of the risk assessment, that might be part of the risk assessment as well, is the ecological, as well as other animals and other life forms. So yeah.
Ethan, just a point of information. Can you just put forth a thumbnail of what you are referring to with zone 2 versus zone 1?
Oh, okay. Zone 1 is essentially, to keep it simple, zone 1 is the for public wells that provides drinking water. Zone 1 is the area that always supplies water to that well. So there's a cone of influence, so to speak, that the well, when it's operating it on a standard basis, it's drawing water in. Zone 2 is when either it's a drought situation or the wells are being used more than typically, or drawing in more water because it needs to. And that usually, zone 2 is either an interim zone 2, which is just a radius around the well, or a determined or defined zone 2 through hydrogeological studies, in which the zone 2 up in that part of the town is defined by hydrological studies. And it was accepted by DEP as an actual zone 2. So It doesn't look like a circle. It looks more like a funny amoeba or something like that. And it has a funny looking shape, but it's based upon hydrogeological studies and assessment. And that's what zone 2 is. So zone 2 would be, the requirement is to protect the wells, the water resource used for drinking. And so that there's less of a chance, or trying to eliminate any chance of contamination of that water source. Is what the zone 2 is about. So what something you might be more familiar with in Board of Health is, if there's a septic system designed for zone 2, then you have to take special precautions, or let's say if it's a new development versus an existing home, there are different rules that apply, again, to limit the chance of contaminating or influencing the drinking water or the groundwater there.
Unica,
What's that?
Unica,
Some of them, yeah.
yeah.
So there's different restrictions or conditions you have to place on that Title V system if it's in a zone 2 that you would not place on a system that was in a non-critical area. Correct? Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Ethan.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we've got one concern, or actually we have two concerns. One is what parts per trillion that were PPT that we're placing into this document, correct? Is it 20, and why is it 20? Is it 50? Why is it 50? That's one concern. The second concern is aerosol water even a legitimate health concern? Aerosol. Do the board members have any other concerns about this this draft as presented tonight?
I did find some random things throughout, but not, for this discussion. Of course, I've already forgotten all of them. Oh, one question I had was on 3.5. It says distance, ... shall be maximized. I feel like that's vague to a fault. I don't know what the answer should be, but I feel like not only is that difficult for someone to adhere to, it's difficult for us to justify whatever we would decide. So I didn't know if John, Ethan, others have thoughts on sort of what that should look like, or if that's right, and I'm just.
Well, location 3.5.
That goes back to 1992 or whatever.
Yes, this is old. We're not putting this in. They put it in years ago,
Right.
decades ago.
Well, I guess my question is, should we change that, or are we okay with it? Maybe in 30 years, no one's ever asked.
Well, the Title V has certain requirements, but I'm almost positive that would be addressed when you rewrite the entire regulation. And I don't even think there's a need for it to be there, because Title V covers that. Right now,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think anybody's agree.
But I guess maybe even the question is, I was sort of looking at the document in its entirety, and I understand, Jaikar, that you were wanting to maybe fix a specific place and then we could go back. I agree that we don't want to wait for 20 years. On the other hand, I kind of like the idea of going through the whole thing. That way, if someone were to ask, why did you do this? I could say, yeah, we talked to DPW. These are the numbers. Yeah, we saw these old things. We thought they should be changed. Or we really thought everything was fine.
Well, if I may, the reason is that the irrigation well permit application, or the use of the irrigation wells in Glen Ellen is a primary concern.
Yeah, no, I understand.
That's why.
I understand that. I guess, but everything, I thought the way that we had discussed it, does nothing is grandfathered in public health.
Correct.
So is the idea that we're trying to help them not have to backtrack if they start doing something? And so we're trying to be expedient that way?
I could let the others speak to that, but I was gonna say, I would look at it somewhat differently, and that is, well, the board has a lot of flexibility here. So in other words, the idea is to make sure that the current regulation captures irrigation wells. You could say, for example, then you pass this regulation to include irrigation wells. But you could simply say, well, it's gonna take some time for, let's say, let's just use Glen Ellen as an example, for Glen Ellen to meet those requirements of testing and then doing a peer review and so forth and so on. If it does come up with contaminants, should Glen Ellen be allowed to use the irrigation system before all that is accomplished? You certainly could do that. Or you could say, no, you cannot use it because you decide not to.
Right.
It's in your opinion.
Yeah.
And to finish the entire body of regulations is gonna take a couple of months before that's ready. That was the other part.
And that's sort of the argument Jack Carr's making, that
Yeah,
we do think the entire thing needs to be gone over, but it's longer than I guess I'm realizing.
yeah,
Yeah, we're supposed to be going on the new regulations. This is only temporary.
Yeah.
New regulations should come out maybe 6 months from now, whatever, and it would, all this would be changed.
I guess I'm worried that, I hear what you're saying. On the other hand, I worry that if we fix the part we think is the most critical, we might keep kicking the can down the road, whereas if something critical is, I don't want to say looming, because that's a little strong, but is on our minds, maybe that helps us get the whole thing done, or maybe I'm thinking it the wrong way. I'm really open to what you guys think. I just want to sort of play devil's advocate, maybe.
good point.
And how many years have they been using this irrigation well? Have there been any issues, any problems in the community? Like, why all of a sudden it's a
Well,
terrible risk?
what we do know from the reports, and correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, but the irrigation well system was put in place what year? It's in your report.
I believe the pond was 2001, but I can pull it up.
So the pond was 2001. We don't know if the irrigation system of some sort was used before then, and then they built the pond to handle, and what we don't know.
Right.
So we don't have a lot of data, but at least 2001. And we also know that the golf course closed a couple, how many years, 2000, when did the golf course close? I think it was 2021 or 2016, at least about approximately 5 to 7 years ago. So then the system was laying dormant and not used. And by the way, there's a number of other questions about that whole system, but we don't, again, that's not for discussion right now.
Right.
So this is on the top, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 2000.
So this is from Danielle's review of the data. Golf course, what does it say here?
Is it on page 1 or 2 you're talking about?
You remember?
It's just that top thing right there. There's
Right here.
man-made irrigation.
Oh, in 2001, and the golf course closed, I believe. Oh, I don't have the number in front of me, but it's at least 5 to 10 years ago, somewhere around there. Maybe not 10 years ago, but somewhere between 5 and 6, 7 years ago. And we don't know, and as far as I know, but it maybe Ted Merchant can say, but I don't think the irrigation system has been turned on yet. I don't think it was used last year, or was it?
Yeah, they've been using it since is Ted Merchant still there?
Yeah, he's got his hand up.
Okay,
I think he's,
Yeah, thought I could answer some of these questions. So,
Thank
the pond itself and the irrigation well have been in place since 2001-ish. The well itself has been used by the golf course when we purchased the project. It was permitted by DEP at the time for a water withdrawal permit. Both that well and well number 2, which we had a permit application with you, were both permitted when we purchased the project under DEP's water withdrawal permit. And the system, the golf course probably stopped operation in 2017. We picked up in 2018 and had the irrigation system active in 2021. So we reutilized the existing irrigation well that the golf course had. And the reason we are back before you now with a permit application is that there was a misunderstanding on the upgrade of a pump and whether that needed to warrant a permit. So in reality, this has been being used for 4 to 5 years, with, as was always intended. And I know that we are not, this isn't our permit application being discussed, but I'm just trying to give some background information.
So, Ted,
Yeah,
can I just?
let me just say that, I thought we had said that you were putting in a, new, what do you call it inside the pump, a new pump. Yes, we said that you needed to get a permit from us.
Yeah, right. That is the misinterpretation that we discovered maybe 6 months ago, and why you've had our application in front of you for that long.
So you couldn't do anything with it, well, that was not completed then.
Right. I've given you the history, right? We used the existing system from the golf course for a certain period of time. We installed a new pump to pump more water into the system, and did not obtain a permit for doing that. We're back in front of you retroactively to get that permit.
So, Ted, let me just clarify. The system was dormant, as far as you know, from 2017 to 2021,
Something along those lines.
approximately.
Yeah.
And then in 2021, or approximately 2021, Toll Brothers began to use it for irrigation purposes?
Correct.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure. And at that time, if I may, and I know it's not on the topic, did you only use one well, or did you use more than one well since 2020?
We've only ever used the one well.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
This is well one.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
What's being shown on the screen at this point? What document is this? With title irrigation?
Danielle did some file research, document research in the Board of Health office. So some of this was some irrigation, related to irrigation, and the other part of the document is related to the water supply, the cold water issue.
Okay.
So both in that document.
Okay, and
If I may, it's only a review of the documents only held in the Board of Health office. Does not include DPW documents.
okay. And this is a review of our current information and regs about irrigation wells, or information that's relevant to irrigation wells in Millis? Is that what this document is, or?
Well, it's mainly related to the Glen Ellen development, but it's basically everything I pulled out that was relevant to, I think, the current issue being discussed about this well and potential health hazards.
Okay. Okay,
It
so
was
this
not,
is all,
it was not intended to be a broad research project on all of irrigation wells in Massachusetts or elsewhere.
Right, no, not at all.
okay. So, and this is relevant to the question about why are we even doing what we're doing with the irrigation wells, regulations? Is that, okay. I'm just trying to track back to what the original question was, original focus. Okay, looks like an interesting document. Okay, so what I'm hearing is there's a concern again about what number PPT goes into the irrigation well portion of the updated regs. There's a concern about whether aerosolized water, i.e. water that comes through an irrigation system, is actually of health concern. And the third is, do we want to focus on the good enough portion of the water regs update by engaging this irrigation well portion of our updated documents, or do we want to pause on that and roll that back into updating the entire regs at the same time? So those are the three three concerns that I have heard tonight around this agenda. Do I have any other concerns or a concern that's been voiced that I missed?
I think that's everything.
Okay. Portion or, okay, entirety. Okay, so we've got 10 more minutes on this agenda. Courtesy of moving many agendas to next time.
Wait till the next
So-
agenda.
So actually, I think the one that's probably the easiest to resolve and then go into the harder ones would be to take up making a decision on, do we want to focus on updating the irrigation well portion of the regs first, starting with either doing it tonight or one more time pushing it off until we get numbers, and that would require people being responsible for finding numbers or not. Or do we want to roll it all together and just tackle it tonight, but we don't the irrigation portion, but we don't do an official update. We do okay, we've updated this and now we're going to pause on confirming it until we do the rest of the regulations. So I think that's,
Can I interrupt? Can I
yes,
interrupt? I'm sorry, but I just got a text and right out of the press. I contacted a colleague of mine who works with the EP's standards office, who works on PFAS. And she's now available if she wants to have her join the meeting. She could talk about how those numbers are determined.
oh, that's great. If she wants to come on and identify herself, please, that'd be great.
Van County?
Was it? No. Oh. Okay, I'm just sending her a text right now.
Okay.
Okay, it'll take a minute, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting for her, but I guess this, if we can get clarity on numbers, that might make a difference for isolating.
I'm sorry, she's taking her helmet and bike coat off right now. She biked home. Doesn't like having instant information.
Okay,
I'll say for my part, I wanted to make sure, like, I felt like if someone asked me, why did you pick a number, that I felt I could defend that, whether that be just getting information from DPW, or if we have information tonight, I just wanted to be okay on that. I see the sense in not waiting to do everything, so I could be comfortable with moving forward on sort of a piecemeal approach, as long as, again, I felt like I could defend whatever numbers we put in.
This might help you when she joins.
Yeah.
At least you'll be able to ask her questions. She would then. If whoever's controlling the joining her name would be Wendy. When she shows up on the whatever that screen is.
John, is there somebody who will be able to do that?
What's that?
To have Wendy's put her name up in terms of participant?
Yes, we have, we get right here, I have it, the participants to let them in, right here.
She hasn't joined
Okay.
yet.
No, she hasn't joined it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
She was room.
Oh, yeah, there should be a wait.
Committed.
Who lets him in on the waiting room? There should be a waiting room.
No, there's no, it comes right through here.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Yeah, it comes right through here, that's participant. So it's,
She'll let me know.
when I came in through Zoom, there was a waiting room.
Yeah, there was.
yeah, but that's, it shows up here as a person, then I say admit.
Oh,
No,
oh,
you-
okay.
yeah,
Okay,
no,
so
nothing's
you've got-
shown right now. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got the
Yeah.
waiting room. Okay, great.
Wait. Yeah, right here.
See that?
Yeah, she's Wendy.
Like her name.
She's, yeah. She's right there.
Okay. Are you there, Wendy?
You're muted.
From use.
You're muted.
Okay,
Ah,
right.
there she is.
There you go.
Welcome.
Can I-
thank you.
Oh,
So
Should I-
Ethan, you want to introduce, please?
Sure.
Sure.
Thank you. Wendy, this is Ethan, and we're in the middle of a Board of Health meeting. You've joined in the middle, and they're talking about PFAS and irrigation wells. And I said that I know somebody that might know a little bit about PFAS. Not
Okay.
much, but a little. So if you can
Okay.
introduce yourself.
All
Okay.
right, so yes, I'm Wendy Heiger Bernays. I am Professor Emerita at Boston University School of Public Health. I'm also chair of the Lexington Board of Health. And for full disclosure, I am Chief of Research at the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection in the Office of Research and Standards. But what I would say today is with my Professor Emerita hat on, where I study PFAS, the health effects associated, and the derivation of drinking water concentrations based on the toxicity of the data.
Thank
Okay.
you. I hand it over to the chair now.
So, Matt, do you want to voice your concern about number? And Wendy can perhaps address that.
Yeah, hi Wendy. I'm wondering if you can tell us how some of these numbers were set for the different limits on PFAS as a whole, but also individual chemicals within the PFAS family.
Sure. In Massachusetts, there are 6 PFAS chemicals that are regulated, and those are called the PFAS 6. Each of those chemicals has its own standard based on the toxicity of the chemical and based on the way we understand these chemicals to work. We understand that they can work in an additive fashion. Their toxicity, the mechanism of action seems to be similar enough such that if exposure occurs to multiple of them, we sum those concentrations. And in Massachusetts, the sum of the 6 PFAS is 20 nanograms per liter or parts per trillion. And each of those chemicals has gone through an evaluation based on, we typically use the toxicity values that are derived by the US Environmental Protection Agency. Massachusetts has added 2 additional chemicals to its list, but the approach is a risk-based approach to develop those concentrations. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Great.
Things I would mention is that we're debating whether there should be a single standard for both drinking and irrigation water, or if there's a reason to have different numbers. So maybe you could comment on that.
Right. So the way that the numbers, the drinking water standards are derived are based on what we know about consumption rates, how much water per day, normalized to body weight for the most susceptible populations. And for the PFAS, these chemicals affect development. So they start to affect the development in utero of the fetus, and then there are developmental effects that continue to occur in the infant, the newborn and the infant. And so those numbers are based on protecting the most susceptible population, which for these PFAS is the infant. And so the numbers are derived based on what we know about consumption rates for pregnant women. And so those numbers, again, are intended to protect the people of the Commonwealth from the effects of PFAS in their drinking water. So with regard to irrigation, right, it's, you know, irrigation is a different beast than a little bit than drinking water. However, I think there are two things to consider. One is that the concentrations of PFAS that are problematic in Massachusetts and across sort of the, at this point, the landscape in the US, they're known to be, they are probably per unit the most toxic chemicals that we have experienced, that we've worked with, that we understand about their toxicity. And so there are a couple of considerations with regard to irrigation, and that is that the irrigation water doesn't stay sort of in the irrigation space. If you're irrigating, right, what happens is you use the water, and there are potential pathways by which people can be exposed to that, let's just say the PFAS in that water. One is certainly through aerosolization, inhalation of aerosols that contain PFAS. Another is if the water is used for gardening, there is some concern about the deposition of the water on gardening and then potential uptake into some plants. But the third, and I think probably the most potentially problematic, is that once the water is out on the ground, it's not going to stay there, right? The PFAS isn't going to stay on the ground. It's actually going to then leach into the surface of the soil and down back into ultimately into the groundwater. This has been really well studied for at least PFOA and PFOS. And those studies come from what we've learned from application of biosolids, what we've learned from farmers whose irrigation water is contaminated with PFAS, and that what you create is sort of this circular problem where you then are putting that PFAS back into the soil and ultimately into the water. If that water happens to be a potential source for other sort of down gradient drinking water wells or zones of influence for drinking water wells, that can be a problem for that can be a problem because we're not allowed to contaminate groundwater up gradient of drinking water wells. So it's something to consider. You asked, but that's not the question you asked me. You asked me about drinking water standards and irrigation standards and whether they should be the same. I think a risk analysis could be done to determine perhaps what that impact might be. I suspect you'll find that if you were to do a risk analysis, that those concentrations would be lower, right, in the irrigation water. And that could be the basis of standards. But again, I think that potential for recontamination in the in the groundwater upgradient of drinking water wells could also be a legal problem. But I'm not, again, I have my Board of Health hat on and my my scientist hat on, but it's something to consider.
Thanks, it's very helpful. Another question. It's probably going to sound a little silly because toxic chemicals are always toxic.
No, it's not silly. This is a really hard problem.
Yeah, is there an age at which there's less concern about coming into contact with these chemicals? So for instance, I'm 42. I can't carry a baby. you know, is there a concern for the next 40 years or not?
So here's the concern. And in fact, we're just working on a model now that where we're using all the data that we can find to understand what our body burdens of PFAS are like under certain conditions. What that means is these are chemicals that don't break down in the body and they don't break down in the environment. And we, all of us, have been exposed to PFAS for the last, you said 48, the last 48 years of your life, you have been exposed to PFAS, whether you like it or not. We know this from what's called the NHANES study, the National Health and Nutrition Study, which is a large, 100,000 person per year study that looks at levels of PFAS in people in the United States across the country in their bodies. And what we know is that even people who don't live in places where there is, we call them impacted communities, where their drinking water is not highly contaminated, even those people have body burdens. That means the amount of PFAS that is already in their bodies at levels that are measurable. So if I were to measure your serum, I would find concentrations of all of those 6 PFAS that Massachusetts is regulating. And I would find concentrations that the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine has found concerning. And so when we are thinking about what is the most susceptible population, we know it's not the 40-year-old male. We know it's not the 70-year-old male, but we do know that our populations have concentrations where we are seeing health effects associated with PFAS, even in the absence of additional exposure. So you're not the most susceptible population, but you don't have zero. And what that means is that the national academies have set what we call minimal, where they want to minimize the health risk, right? And those are concentrations of PFAS in the body that are at these sort of lowest levels. When we start to increase those concentrations through additional exposures, what we do is we move people into the next category. And the recommendations are that at these higher concentrations or these higher body burdens, that our clinicians should be monitoring, for example, for elevated cholesterol, for thyroid, changes in thyroid levels, and in changes in lipid levels. And these are things that at 48 and above, we tend to see, right? And so by adding additional PFAS, what we're doing is we have the potential to push populations into those higher categories. And the recommendations now are really focus on exposure, decrease exposure as best you can. And that would include removing additional sources that could increase that exposure, especially for PFOA, PFAS, and a couple of others. Is that
Thank you.
helpful?
That's very, very helpful.
Great.
You want to ask about Sure.
Do you know of any health effects from aerosolized PFAS?
No, that is a new area of research. And in fact, most of that research is focused on global patterns of PFAS, meaning that researchers are measuring PFAS in air, and they're measuring PFAS in air in places certainly alongside water bodies. They're measuring them in other situations. And I think the hypothesis now is that PFAS are what we call semi-volatile, right? So under certain conditions, they will volatilize into the air. But because of their chemistries, because they are soluble in water, and because of their behavior, they tend to create these aerosols. And now researchers are starting to measure those aerosols in places that they hadn't previously observed them. So I don't think that we could put our finger on exactly what the contribution is, but I think what you're going to find in the next couple of years is the measurement of PFAS in aerosols in places where there is active sort of movement of water into into the outdoor space.
Wendy, can I ask a question briefly? And that
Of
is,
course.
if one were to breathe in or inhale aerosolized PFAS, what
Yeah.
happens in your body?
What happens what?
In my body, if I breathe it in?
Oh, well, likely, right? What will happen is that it will enter your bloodstream, and the concentrations are low enough that, so PFAS don't enter the cells and the bloodstream by what we call passive diffusion. Like some chemicals will just sort of diffuse across membranes. Because of the chemistry of PFAS, they actually are transported on what we call these transporters into cells, into our bloodstream, and then from the bloodstream into the organs throughout the body. So PFAS, in addition to needing these transporters to get into the serum, also travel in the serum bound to proteins, right? So they're tagging on to existing proteins in the serum. And when you inhale them, the cells of the epithelial cells, the alveoli, do have PFAS transporter proteins that can allow those chemicals to enter into the lung and then into the systemic circulation. And I say low enough concentrations because when you get really high concentrations, there's less, it's almost as if those transporters are saturated and they can't allow more to pass into the body. But at low concentrations, which is what we're talking about, they easily enter the body.
Do they bind to all proteins or a certain class,
No.
or is it proteins?
Oh, they will bind to almost all proteins, but they don't bind to, but their transporters are specific.
Okay.
And that's work that's actually done. Most of that work is done by Angie Slitt at University of Rhode Island, if you're interested in looking at her work.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
It's
we
a
should have
hard
more
problem. It's a hard problem.
Wait, Matt just said he wished he has more questions for you. Who's gonna win the Red Sox game tonight?
That I cannot answer. I could talk about PFAS all night. It's forever, the forever chemical. Sorry.
I'm
Well,
not in
and
charge of speaking, so are there more questions?
Well, there was a suggestion to make irrigation well contamination for PFAS at 50 ppts. Does that make sense? There's also a question whether we should put it at 20 ppt, which would be the drinking water limits.
Yeah, I think you may run into problems with 50 because it's somewhat arbitrary, right? I think you would have to have a basis for setting 50. I think it could be easily challenged. I mean, 20 might be challenged as well, but I think, 50, I don't, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, as you're saying, less is actually more concerning, so the lower
Yeah,
amounts.
it'll absorb really quickly. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you want less, Carol suggested you should have more PFAS.
No, we don't want more. We got enough. We got enough.
How about 100?
I'll go for, actually, it's funny because when New York was developing their drinking water standard for PFOA, it was almost like I think we should go for 20. No, we should go for 10. Didn't seem particularly scientific. It was like bingo or something.
You have questions?
No?
Okay, we have a BU student.
No, I
here.
do have one more question. This is just.
Well, you have a
review.
BCU student? Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, you've lectured to a couple of my classes.
Oh, great.
So do these chemicals, when they bind the protein, modulate any functions? Or
They
are they
do.
really just touching a ride? They
Yeah.
do.
No, they do. And interestingly, there is some, that's the $1 million question, right? How do they exert their toxicity in so many different organs that have so many different functions? Now, what we know the most about PFOA and about PFAS. And that's because those are the oldest ones, or the ones that have been best studied. We know that they will bind to a receptor called PPAR alpha, and they are then able to, it's not just this PPAR alpha receptor that they can turn on, and that, but it's a combination of that plus other molecular receptors, if you're interested, like the CAR receptor. And anyway, so I think the best studied mechanism is that which increases cholesterol, specifically LDLs, and also is capable of disrupting the sort of the lipid. It's the dyslipidemia, right? So creating a dysregulated system by which your body has sort of, I would say, the range of normal levels, healthy levels of LDLs and VLDLs. And so I think the best studied mechanism is through these nuclear receptors. And people are really trying to understand how all these other effects occur, how it disrupts the immune system to decrease the immune response to vaccine preventable diseases. That is not something we want to do right now, since we'd like people to have their vaccines and we would like them to be able to respond. And some of the other effects we just don't understand. So that is an area of active research. And so your question is, I wish we did have the data, but we just don't.
Maybe one last question. I'm like you, I could probably ask you questions all night. Is it understood?
You could come to my Board of Health meeting.
Yeah, right. Is it understood, either directly or indirectly, if these chemicals affect epigenetics or other sorts of gene regulation?
No, and people are just starting to look at that. So people are using mostly metabolomics at this point because of the best studied endpoints, which are effects on the liver and the lipidomics. So they're using metabolomics. There have been, I think I'm talking to somebody who understands like GWAS and all the other kinds of things. Okay. All right. So yeah, there is some, epigenetic analysis and some GWAS kinds of analyses. The problem really is how do you do that in the right animal model? Because you want to have an animal model that has the same capabilities as the human system, and yet it can be challenging to do. And if you do it in humans, you have the problem of the human and all the other stuff, right? So it's just beginning. I would say that EPA has made incredible headway on non-animal model approaches to understanding sort of the modes of action using their, if you're not familiar with it, you might want to check out their CompTox database. It is phenomenal database. It still exists. And this is a part of EPA that may still continue. I have no idea. But what they're doing is they're trying to recreate sort of, the liver on a chip and the, really trying to tackle this question of how does this happen?
Yeah. Thank you. Very appreciate it.
You're welcome.
This is your last chance for Wendy.
I was gonna say, she just got home. She wants
Well,
to go eat.
you could come. What?
Said you just got home. You want to go eat or do something probably.
Yeah,
walk your
that's-
dog.
Oh, hey, you know what? I like talking about PFAS. Nobody wants me at a dinner table. Nobody wants to talk about this stuff.
Aren't we already being exposed through like the food chain and like every product we buy on the shelves? Like,
Funny you should mention this. I will end by saying we just published a paper that just came out this week, and Ethan, you can share it. It's in ES&T, Environmental Science and Technology. And we worked with a group in California. California has an amazing biomonitoring program. Several states have it. Massachusetts doesn't have one. And what that means is that they enroll, thousands of people, and they measure in their serum, in their blood, in their urine, a number of chemicals. And they track those levels over time. And we worked with the California Department of Public Health on this study. Had a doctoral student named Emily Penoyer. She's the first author on the paper. And what we did was we went in with a hypothesis. And our hypothesis was that we were going to find that the serum levels of PFAS in these people was going to be predicted by the type of food that they ate. Now, along with the serum levels which they measure the PFAS, goes a survey, a very extensive survey where people are asked about their demographics, whether they've been in this country, how long have they been in this country, how long have they lived in their current home, what are some of their practices in their home, what kind of textiles do they have, what kind of all sorts of products do they use, what kind of food do they eat, what is the frequency with which they eat those foods. And we expected to see that the overwhelming signal of the PFAS in the serum would be due to consumption of high protein meat or fish, right? Because we talked about the fact that these things bind to proteins, and there's been some good evidence that food that's high in protein contains high levels of PFAS. We were very surprised because what we showed in this study is that the majority of the PFAS is not from food, but instead from drinking water. And the drinking water levels of PFAS in the participants' homes is known because they're all on public water supplies. And what we did was we worked with the California Department of Environmental Protection to understand who had which water and when. And so the the homes were geocoded to the water supply. So we had very good control of understanding of their PFAS in their drinking water. And through robust statistical methods, we were able to show that the major contributor to the PFAS in the serum was the drinking water. And drinking water concentrations were fairly low. So it's pretty clear, and we hypothesized that we see this because there have been changes in food packaging, which was a major source of PFAS into our food. In the United States, most food packaging has lower concentrations of the PFAS that we've most studied. So, for example, the 6 PFAS that are regulated in Massachusetts. And so we think that there's been a change in production. And FDA has also shown this, that the concentrations of PFAS in foods has decreased with time. This is not the case for locally caught fish. We know that to be freshwater fish in the United States have elevated PFOS wherever it's caught. But I think that the concern that it's in everything, so we can't really identify how to decrease our exposure. I think we're learning that there are exposures that really matter, and there are those that matter sort of in the big picture because we want to decrease what's in the environment, because that will contribute to what's in our drinking water. But I think we don't want to take our eyes off what we know based on our analyses to be really important, which is water. So I don't know if that's useful, but we worry a lot that people are going to be so overwhelmed with it's everywhere. It's in the paint in our homes. It's in our dental floss. We can't deal. I think that the water is a place where we can deal, right? That we have to decrease our exposures to PFAS in water. And I think it's pretty ironic. I'll send it to you, Ethan.
Okay,
Ethan,
please
why are
do.
you laughing at me? Okay,
No,
so anyway.
No. Carol wants to ask another question.
About dental floss?
That's why we're laughing, because we're never gonna let you go.
Yeah, that's why we're laughing
I
at
just got a
Carol,
quick
not
question for
you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You're on the Board of Health.
I
Do
am.
you have regulations for irrigation wells and the levels of PFAS in your irrigation wells for your town?
Yeah, we actually have irrigation. So we have very, very few private drinking water wells, and we have very few irrigation wells. So what we did was we updated our private well requirements, regulations, to include the PFAS 6. And we also include new irrigation wells. So these are our new wells. And we will probably, interestingly, we didn't have a comparison in the reg, but what we will use are the drinking water values. And they may be contested, I don't know. And the reason we did this is because we have a couple, like everybody has, old landfills, right? And our old landfills are actually exempt from much of the DEP stuff. They were grandfathered, I don't know how many years ago. And these are where our playing fields are. And for years, the playing fields were artificial turf, which of course is a whole nother chapter of stuff, microplastics and everything else. And there were a number of neighbors that were installing irrigation wells. And the concern for us was that we don't always know what's up gradient of the irrigation well or what's in the groundwater that the irrigation well will be drawing up and out onto the land. And that was particularly concerning. And so that's what we have. I know that there are other towns that have more rigorous requirements, even for I think their irrigation wells for testing before land transfer. And these are communities that do have PFAS in some of the drinking water wells, like Harvard, Mass.
With irrigation wells that are spray irrigation.
Yeah.
Any other comments about that?
No, I think the concern for that may not be, I mean, it's the PFAS, but it's also the other stuff that may be in it. Certainly the pesticides, which are, shall we say, loosely regulated, if regulated. And there are PFAS pesticides. So depending upon your definition of what is a PFAS, and we wrote a paper on this as well. I'd love to pull my students in so that they become first authors on these papers. We actually asked, so what's the definition of a PFAS? And we actually used 6 definitions, 2 EPA definitions, 1 TURA. You may not be familiar with the Toxics Use Reduction Act in Massachusetts. It's a beautiful, incredible resource that we have here. So TURA is the overall objective of TURA, right, is to decrease the use of toxic materials so that they don't then have to be regulated and enforced by DEP. So if you could work with industries to decrease their use of very highly toxic materials, and they can you can work with them to sort of switch out and use less toxic materials, well, that's good for the workers. It's usually good for the economy, and it's definitely good for the environment. So TURA has a definition of what a PFAS is, and there are definitions from the Organization of Economic, the OECD in Europe, and the Department of Defense has its own definition. And so what we did was we compared those definitions, and we used pharmaceuticals actually as the comparator. And we asked, based on each of these definitions, which of these pharmaceuticals would be defined as a PFAS chemical. And actually the lead author on that is also, I think she was Hamill at the time. And what we showed was that, and you could do the same with pesticides, and what we showed was that for some definitions, there are pesticides that we showed for pharmaceuticals that are actually PFAS. Now, are we suggesting that people not take pharmaceuticals? Absolutely not. But we were suggesting that the definition matters. And from writing regulations, you have to have clear definitions, right? And so these pesticides are not subject to the same definitions as, for example, the EPA loosely regulated chemicals. And so if you're also bringing up in your irrigation water pesticides, that have been used for a long time, that contain these fluorinated moieties, that could add to the contribution of PFAS back in the air, in the deposition, and in the groundwater. So it's just something to think about. And new research that is ongoing right now is focused on, there are the estimate is 12,000 different PFAS chemicals in commerce. We are regulating 6. To date, every single PFAS has had higher toxicity than almost any other chemical that we've ever studied. The smaller ones are less toxic. Those are the replacements. But the replacements, the original replacements, we had PFOA, which was sort of the granddaddy of them all. DuPont recognized early on that this was highly toxic, and they put a sulfate group on the chemical, and then we got PFOS, even more toxic than PFOA. And so this is the way it goes. We have these greater than 8 carbon in length and bigger, and then we have smaller ones, and we generally think of 3 carbons to 6 carbons as being small, the short PFAS. We don't regulate those, but there's good evidence that those actually can convert to the longer ones. If you oxidize them, they come out in the air, for example, they can convert to PFOA, PFOS, PFHXS, the longer chain ones. And we're not at all regulating the smaller ones. And colleagues at Harvard, well, I don't know if they have money to do this anymore, but colleagues at Harvard have developed a method to look at what we call ultra shorts. And the ultra shorts are where the pesticides are. And there's good evidence that you can get recombination to form the longer chain ones. So these 6 are sort of the very tip of the iceberg. As time goes on, we'll learn more and more about the shorter ones and how they behave in the environment and certainly in people. Okay, I think I'm done lecturing you. I'm happy to answer. Ethan can, you can get me back on if you want. Because again, I can talk about this till the cows come home.
I think everyone here stayed not just awake, but wide alert, very alert. I think it was interesting. And the only person I haven't heard from is Jai Kar, who's the chair. Is she still there?
She's here.
I'm here. No, I was just soaking it in. I mean, this is like, it's like candy.
I know.
Yeah, it is. It's just like, I want more. I want more.
So you know what we're doing now, actually? I don't know if you've actually after the nor'easters, this should be a good time to go look. So there's something called enriched foams. And if you go out on a water body like a river, a lake, a stream, yes. The Merrimack River. I showed that photo today, Ethan. So what happened, these PFAS, right, they are surfactants, and surfactants are like soap, right? And so what'll happen when the soap becomes agitated, you get foam. So there are naturally occurring foams that contain things like organic materials, organic sort of like from tree bark and sort of microbial stuff from the environment. And those foams tend to have a brownish color, and they smell a little fishy, right? Now, the other kind of foams that you might find if you go out after the storm are they tend to be bright white. And those bright white foams are actually PFAS enriched foams. And what we know is that we can measure the concentration in the surface water below that foam. And what we'll find is that the foams we call it an enrichment factor. So the concentration in the surface water will be low. It'll be like 8 parts per trillion. And then you'll see 40,000 parts per trillion in the foam. And this foam fractionation is actually one of the remedial efforts, remedial approaches to removing PFAS from water, right? Which is to create a bubble water into at the drinking water plant, bubble water in and create these foams and then remove the foam. And you can find them out. They're sort of elusive, but you can find them out on the water bodies, and don't touch them. And in a couple days, they'll dissipate. But, we're learning a lot about, sort of, can we see them? Can we find them? What do they look like? What are the concentrations? And what are the health risks?
Wendy, last week Danielle was with me in Lawrence and we crossed
Yeah.
over the Merrimack River shortly after a storm. And there was plenty to see there, plenty.
Yeah, no, those are probably coming from one of two things. One is runoff. There is, it may actually even be coming from New Hampshire because the St. Gobain facility in New Hampshire, which was there for many years, their manufacturing facility coated materials. So they were a fabric coating facility. They had many large contracts with DoD. And if you've ever flown into the Colorado airport and you see those wing-like things, those are coated in PFAS, and they were coated at the St. Gobain facility. The problem with the St. Gobain facility is that they had no stack emission controls, and the PFAS ended up in the air, aerosol, deposited on the land, and believe it or not, contaminated the drinking water. And the contaminated drinking water in Merrimack has been an ongoing issue. St. Gobain just shut down, but they have discharge that continues into the Merrimack River. So that's one source. We know because we've measured that. And the other, of course, is after a rain event, you get runoff from the land. If there had been a FFF, the firefighting foam that had been used, or likely if you have a combined sewer overflow, you get discharge of untreated sewage that goes into the Merrimack, and that may be a source that's providing those suds that Ethan and Danielle saw.
Thank you.
Up close and personal. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Danielle's gonna be working on PFAS this summer in another internship, but I decided to introduce her to PFAS on the Merrimack River last week, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
But she's very.
All right, Jayakar?
All right.
No, I felt like it's like, this is magical timing. So thank you for interrupting your coming home and doing your dinner for answering questions that had come up. And as well as providing anybody that's watching this YouTube video, or YouTube episode, wonderful information, elementary information about PFAS. And what I appreciated your differential between vulnerable and accumulative in terms of, they're different, but they're similar at the same time in terms of they're both important important truths to understand, that vulnerable is of concern, but so is accumulated,
Right.
and what that difference is. You spoke to it very well. So and I find it a fascinating topic because it's what I've been reading is it's PFAS footprints in a lot of chronic medical conditions that, a lot of chronic medical conditions. So what we've attributed to, many other factors, PFAS kind of begins to.
It's really interesting. Ethan, I'll send you a couple of pieces of work. One is in the Lancet, came out not that long ago, by two very prominent physicians, one pediatrician and one occupational health doc who worked with people in Parkersburg, West Virginia. If you haven't seen the movie Dark Waters, that's where that occurred. And another, so there is something in the Boston, in each of the there are 10 regions in the United States that have a pediatric environmental health specialty unit, or PACU. And PFAS is now sort of taking over much of their time, getting clinicians up to speed. And in fact, the Department of Public Health is developing educational materials for clinicians about PFAS because of this, a pretty well established connection between exposure, serum levels, and health outcomes. So.
Thank you for sending those to me in advance. And I'll make sure it gets distributed to the folks here.
Great.
Yeah, Wendy,
Well,
thank you. It's
thank you
not up
so
to me
much.
to conclude this, but thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. And being on a board of health is like nothing else, right? I mean, you go from a restaurant thing to, I'll say TB. We're not going to say the word measles yet, but
No, but
like, oh yeah,
coming to a town near you soon.
you got it. You
Yeah.
got it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Hey. I hope
Thank
that
you.
helps.
That was like the magic wand of ask a question and, show up an expert.
I now have my PhD. My PhD. Thank you.
Maybe not. Maybe not now.
Well, I hope it answers your questions.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
And it was, obviously her credentials speak for herself, but also when you asked her questions, you could tell she had deep knowledge of the literature.
Yes.
So it's not just shooting from the hip. So I hope if people do listen to this, they find it useful.
Yeah.
No,
it was great. We should retitle this as our Board of Health meeting and a primer on the health impacts of PFAS.
She's been a long time friend of mine and family, and she's also a really important mentor of mine. So.
Okay, so we're at 8 o'clock, which means we are no longer in our borrowed time. I'm looking at the other agendas we've got. So
Do you want to finish up the regs or not, or is that going to be for another meeting?
well, no. I'm kind of trying to pace. Okay. So back to, I think the question I would like the board to come to an answer for is, do we want to take up the irrigation well only portion of this and then move to flush out the rest? Or do we want to put on hold the irrigation well update approval for waiting for it to come to its turn as we go through updating the reg from the beginning to the end? So, and I know that some of both Carol and Matt's pause on answering this was based on lack of information, data. So I'd like to hear from each of you if Wendy's answering of questions made any difference in how you are thinking at this time about what we want to do tonight with this irrigation draft or not.
The concerns, if we test for PFAS in these wells, how many wells or how many portions of this town are going to become like toxic sites? Because if you find a certain level of PFAS in the groundwater or whatever you're testing, that then it triggers something. So it's going to have more ramification than just, hey, we tested a well, I get a pump, And it's going to affect the ability to resell property. It's going to affect property values. Like, what's the full ramification? Do we do this just for new wells, or do we go back and say all wells in existence? You know, you gotta set some sort of limits, because
I had a question too, because it wasn't clear in there if it's grandfathered or
Yeah.
if it's new and.
So I can answer that a little bit because I have been doing conversations with, I have had conversations with the Harvard Board of Health Chair extensively. Wendy gave us some information about what Lexington's board has chosen. And I've talked to, what's the one that's two others, Ayers, and out in, I talked to actually Northampton, because I was out there and I actually know that the chair from COVID days. And pretty uniformly, what they have chosen to do is not go back and address existing wells except at point of sale. At point of sale, they do that. The reason being that that property owner most likely would have the option to either purchase the property with the well or to tie into municipal. When I asked whether, I said, so then I asked, I said, what if it's not possible to tie into municipal? And I think it was both Northampton and Harvard said, well, what we're finding is that it's actually encouraging more tie-ins to municipal, because municipal can hold a certain standard regarding PFAS. And it's also moving policy within our town about increasing municipal water access. So because it is such a significant health factor, that, you know, it's rethinking policy in other parts of our government. So again, this is kind of a new, what do you want to call it? Impact that's just beginning to roll out. But as it's rolling out, it's impacting a broader response. The other thing that people are doing is, I know Harvard is starting to do this and referred me to some state legislation that is moving through the process, where the town will either offer low or no cost loans in conjunction with a state bill that's moving through that will offer no or low cost loans to add a treatment process to a well that tests high enough to need treatment. So again, there's the broader base response. And last I checked, there's two bills that have continued to advance, and one is focused on the no cost loan for wells that test over a certain PPT. And they're still working on what PPT. And then there's another one that says that they want to give people 5 years for updating to a PPT number with treatment. So the towns around us in Massachusetts that are now updating regs to include PFAS are also saying we have to do this in a way that does address the financial impact as well. That doesn't mean that we don't say that it has to be responded to. We say, how can we help people respond to it? Does that make sense, Carol?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Chair, that's a question. Are most of those dealing with drinking water, drinking wells as
Yes.
opposed to irrigation
Yes.
wells doing that? Okay, so
Yes.
there's mostly drinking water that's coming through with these. Yes.
Right. And the other thing that both Air and again Northampton, they are discouraging strongly new irrigation wells, because where they want to go is that if you do an irrigation well, it will be held to the exact same standards as drinking water wells. So they're again, they're discouraging both by saying, hey, hook up to municipal, it's already done for you. As well as saying, if you do this, we're going to require testing, and the testing is requiring you to do the same standards as drinking water. And I said, well, how effective is that? And they said, we've seen a 50% drop in applications for irrigation wells. So again, you know, what I was struck by in talking to all these different boards of health, you know, dealing with this issue that we're dealing with is, number one, every new update includes PFAS testing to the, you know, 100%. 100% are also cognizant that they can't move backwards with things, but they can move forward by saying anything that requires a permit going forward does have to have PFAS testing. And the third is that there may be a financial element to a test result, and we, you know, are not going to ignore that. And we've got the state working on it, and we're trying, you know, we're working on how can we make this requirement over time for you. So, but it doesn't seem that not putting PFAS testing in has been something that any one of these 10 boards of health that I contacted was willing to do. So, which actually surprised me. But, you know, the more you learn about PFAS, the more you understand it, why it is something that boards of health are now saying we have no choice but to, you know, come into this 21st century problem. So. Did I answer the question for you, Carol?
That's John's question.
Oh, John, I'm sorry, John, did I answer your
Oh, yes.
question?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Okay.
I was interested in it, but
So,
let me add one more thing, and that is there might be more reading material when Wendy gets those articles to me. I don't know if you want to wait to do some reading or not.
Well, I was just gonna say, I feel like I have the information that I would want. Plus a little bit that I was just reading. My concern is, one, what we have written in there is not fully thought out. Not criticizing, I don't know who wrote it, but just I think we need to make sure we wordsmith it appropriately, and I don't think it's appropriate to do it tonight. I think we could do it before our next meeting in like 2 or 3 weeks. The other thing which you were just talking about is, I think there should be some explicit language in there, unless I missed it, about only new wells or something, because I don't want people to be confused about what they should do, especially because, as you mentioned, we've all mentioned, there is costs associated with remediation, and I want it to be really clear when that does or doesn't need to be done. Even if we would ideally always like it done, maybe that's not what we put in there. And I think we could probably get that cleared up by next time as well, I would think.
There's a cost for testing, there's a cost for remediation and maintaining a system, a filter system. And if you're gonna have regulations for irrigation wells as well as drinking water wells, you're also gonna have filtration systems and costs with irrigation wells now. So this is a significant financial burden to people, the community. So you really got to think about that a little bit more. You know, do we regulate just new wells, or make everybody in Mills that has a well test and get these very expensive systems?
Just on the face of it, my feeling would be you do new wells, and as the legislation that Jack Carr is mentioning, if it is passed, then you can change your regulations to say, okay, now there are protocols in place for you to deal with this. We want everyone to now have to address it.
Especially with that, but sounds like the state is planning on getting, say, grants to help homeowners of wells to afford some of this stuff. You know, if we do it now, they're all forced to buy it now.
Or tie in, but not everyone can tie in.
Yeah, not everyone's in a place they can tie in this town.
Yeah.
This town is not
Yeah, that's the thing.
right.
raining. It's not that, oh, just go out to the street and you hook onto the line. Not everyone has a line going to their house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone here drinks seltzer, by the way, I was just looking it up, but there are actually different levels of PFAS in different seltzers, so.
I love seltzers.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, so I look up Polar and apparently it's got more, I don't know what the exact numbers are, there was a consumer report, but more than some other brands, so.
I just had a Polar Seltzer.
I had one in my bag right here, it's getting ready to pull
I
on,
have
so.
2 dozen in my fridge right now.
I know, right?
Yeah, Ted's got one.
I'll have another drink.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so can I ask if we move this draft review to our next meeting, are we then going to pursue finalizing oh, I shouldn't say, are we going to pursue approving the irrigation well portion of it prior to approving the entirety of our updating water regs or not?
I'm personally comfortable with that, especially now, thank you, Ethan, for bringing in an expert, because we know a lot more now. And I feel like I could be able to justify to anyone that asks why we made this decision.
Okay. Carol, what is your thought?
I just want clearer wording, more specific as to when these things would apply, you know, more specific. This is very broad right now. It's very broad.
Okay, so
Mechanistically, what do we do is, does John work on this in the meantime? Can we all work on this document that's on Dropbox?
I would suggest that everyone could work
I
on
can't be
it,
the only one working on it.
Yeah.
as long as you keep track of the comments and,
Okay.
you know, this is Matt, this is Carol, whatever. And just so you know, I deliberately
Ethan.
wrote it to be very broad. That was the deliberate choice on my part, so you can have this discussion.
Yeah.
Because these things are really, this is where you folks, you know, tag your it. This is where you have to.
well, and I think tag your it is important because it's, you know, each town has its unique, you know, constraints as well as existing support. So it allows us to tailor to what Millis is, but also where Millis is going with this. I mean, I want to have a conversation with Jim McKay of DPW, because DPW also overlaps with Board of Health with wells. And, you know, and see what, you know, is brewing there, as well as concerns that he may have. And, you know, that's another point of information. So I will commit to talking with Jim and putting that into, you know, this common, putting it in the Dropbox. I'll do a summary and put it in the Dropbox so everybody can have that information. And then, you know, which may impact how we, you know, refined our draft here. Okay, so then it sounds like if I make a motion to move this agenda for both consideration and conclusion in terms of an update to the next meeting, that would be something that we are in agreement with. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Chair,
Okay.
make a statement.
Yes.
So this means that the 50 PPT is gone. Right.
It's, well, I think you'd have to ask, so my thought is,
20 is more like it than.
yes,
We're just trying to find where that 50 came from. Like what?
Well, and the thing of it is, it didn't come anywhere special. It came with a bunch of people at a, no, well, it came between me, Glenn, Ager, and, a guy from DEP, Ziegler. And it was this discussion we had about this, and it came out at the end that 50 might be a good idea. And, well, and then a couple days later, Ziegler said, no, I wasn't going over that.
Well, they have some crazy names.
They are. I don't know if, let me say, if, well, she's not, is she here? Katrina Scott, are you there? Are you there? She's on here.
I see.
I'm here. hold on.
I know we had that discussion on
Oh,
the
there
50
you go.
at the time, and.
Karina, can you say who you are?
Oh, yeah,
I can, yes, thank you. My name is Karina Scott. I am the Shared Services Coordinator for the Metro West Shared Public Health Services. Millis is a municipality part of our shared service agreement. So Millis is one of 9 that we kind of help with capacity in terms of a grant that we have with Mass DPH. I don't know if that was a good summary of what I do, but yeah. But what was the question, John? I'm sorry.
I was wondering whether or not you wanted to discuss that, we had that discussion last week or so.
Yeah.
And if 50 PPT came out as being part
Yeah,
of between
did.
Ziegler, DEP, and Glenn Aya, right? Glenn Aya is his name?
Yes. So for the WELS regulation, we have reached out to a TA, a matter expert on the subject, who's worked a lot in with WELS and Title V, and especially with like the conversation that we were having. So we requested assistance when we're looking at the WELS regulations for Millis. My role was really looking at it and seeing if we can make this regional as well. But Glenn Ayers is the expert in terms of what he's been doing in work, mainly in the Berkshires, I would say. I think when he mentioned 50, if I'm recalling correctly, he was saying that it was, either way, because irrigation is something not studied fully, that he wanted to pick something that it wasn't going to get challenged. And he thought 20 would get challenged more than anything else. So they said 50 sounded good. I know he wasn't available today to be here. But if you guys decide to continue working on this, we can invite him for your next meeting and he can talk about that. But yeah, he's retired from public health, but he is contracted through MHOA to help us with any of these assistance. And so he was selected for us due to his background and knowledge in the subject.
And Ziegler wasn't at the meeting. He was described by Glenn how he had to talk to them about the 50. So that's how it came up. Yes.
Yeah.
If I may, I think Wendy's like far above Ziegler.
Well, I don't know.
But
Yeah.
But I actually, from what I heard tonight, was lower is even more important.
Yeah, I would say that I feel supportive of 20. The way that I feel about the 50 is if I was sitting around with a bunch of my colleagues,
Yeah.
we might throw some shit out.
Yeah.
Sorry, but it's true.
I'm not gonna say you're wrong.
Right, but eventually we would do experiments that would support, like, you know what, it really is 22 or whatever. And so I feel like the known data to us is 20 makes sense. I hear you about everyone about it being challenged. I would prefer a number that we think that we can defend to be challenged versus a number that we're not quite sure of. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean,
That's just my opinion.
I
on it,
agree.
but
The Ziegler
tend,
number.
That's what we're gonna start calling it.
yes, and so this number in effect is not something that has real, anything behind it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, we could take it off the list.
And I think,
You could take it
and I
off the
think
list
one of the
right now.
things, let's just pretend in 2 years, it is challenged.
Yeah.
I think what we do is we go to the literature and say, this is why we chose this number, and, it'll be up to others, I think, to make those legal determinations. But I would personally feel good about this number based on data.
Yeah.
20, yes.
Maybe irrigation 10 years ago when they got it, it comes to 50. I can't believe it.
I hope it does, and you said to me,
Unbelievable.
Dude, what do you know?
Thank you. Yeah.
If I may just say one more thing, when we were looking at this was supposed to be an amendment, something quick to look at, but to continue working on the regulation as a whole. So I think, this conversation is very well, it's great. This is what you want to have in a Board of Health, right? Discussion thoughtful discussion, looking at data to make sure that decisions that you make are data driven. I support that. So I just wanted to remind everyone, this was an amendment, and it's open for discussions, obviously. And, you know, you could say fine now, just as the way it is. And then as you look at the full regulation, you do more revisions of it. So I think that's why we left it kind of the way it is. So I just wanted to say that's also a reason as how it's written. But again, the whole regulation, we were looking at it and we wanted to take more time and then a quick look at it. I think we've had maybe 4 weeks really looking at the regulation, looking at several municipalities of what they've done, what they have on their regulations, what are the recommendations. So, and again, irrigation has been something that is new that I don't think we saw in any of the regulations, if I'm correct, Ethan and John, when we were looking at them. I don't think none of them had specific literature wording on irrigation.
Framingham had it in your region. Framingham.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
No, you're fine, no, but just, you know, so I think there wasn't a lot of comparisons to be able to be made, so, but yeah.
Thanks. And I do think that was the appropriate approach, which was, you know, put something in to react to, and then we could collect information. So I like the approach.
Well, thank you.
I'm glad you're here, Karina.
Karina, thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Well, whenever, you know, you guys want to have me back and talk a little bit about what shared services is doing as a whole, as a region, and how we can work a little bit better, or with your Board of Health, I'm happy to talk. I have a whole presentation and some cool stuff that we're doing as a regional team. So happy to come on again and have some time to really talk about shared services and what that means, and have you guys ask questions. But thank you. This is a learning experience for me in general. So I really appreciate the conversations that you guys are having. And I love that you guys are trying to make sure your regulation has a backing and data. So.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that feedback. So, point of order, do we need to make a motion to move this to next meeting? Or can I just essentially say that that's what we're doing?
Probably doesn't hurt to do it.
Okay. And I'm going to put into the motion that we are going to be specific at this next meeting to updating this portion of the regs. Okay, so that's the trade-off. Yes, because we could be here for another 6 months, you know, refining it, but I'm like, any meeting we can refine it. Let's just get a starting point. Okay, so I make a motion that we move let me just get the correct, the agenda of the Regency, of the final well regulation changes specific to the irrigation well portion of our updating of our regulations to our next meeting scheduled for June 2nd, 2025. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So our next agenda item is a discussion of TRC environmental update.
All right, I guess that's me. Very briefly, two things. One is, since we put aside anything with Glen Ellen for the next meeting, I think maybe this belongs there. However, I did hear from them verbally by phone. They had a few more questions, and the person I'm dealing with, his name is also Ethan. We've been going back and forth and bouncing messages, so I don't have anything complete, but I did tell him that we need something by June 3rd. Well, I included Sigrid on this. It's called the Ziegler method.
Sorry.
So we'll give it the Ziegler method, if you don't mind. I should have everything in place for you folks before June 3rd. So we can put it in the Dropbox and for discussion. Because he had a few questions.
Okay, great. So we move this discussion to an agenda item on June 2nd. So, okay,
Is it June 2nd or June 3rd? What was the date?
Second.
It's a
Sorry,
second.
Monday, right?
I
Yes.
have to look
Okay.
Yes, it's a Monday, June 2nd.
Got it,
Okay.
okay.
So because I don't know if we're gonna be able to have the same room again then, I'll have to make it in the other room, the regular.
Well, the crowds are still waiting outside.
Yeah, so this is. No, but I'm saying next week, if we have it on a Monday, then maybe people available from G.
Oh, from our, for the tech support.
GE, right?
RG could.
They're actually-
And they're all being taken up, all the.
Okay,
the-
well, that's easy
fine.
enough because we move this one forward. So John, why don't you find that out? And if we need to move it to Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll work everybody's calendars for that, okay?
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay, so yeah, that's right.
We'll have groups outside and everything. We'll have a police detail.
Okay. So the next agenda item is drum roll, our yearly changing of the guard as to who is chair. Our Board of Health, our board members are elected to a 3-year term, and within that 3-year term, they will have at least one opportunity to be chair. So this is why we rotate the chair from year to year, so that we can have the full range of experiences of being on the board. So the next person in the rotation would be Carol for being the chair. And because we've had this question asked and sometimes get a surprising answer back, I'm going to ask the question, Carol, are you willing to be the chair for the next year?
Yes.
Oh,
That's
wonderful.
Yeah,
Well,
speech.
Matt was on the board when we had a different response, so it does happen. So okay, great.
Yeah, as well, so I feel you.
You want to talk to Ziegler first?
Yeah, I'll talk to Ziegler.
Okay, so this will be my last official act of this rotation as chair. I make a motion
She has to listen.
that Carol Hayes be the next chair of the Board of Health, beginning with the June 2nd, perhaps different date, 2025 meeting. Do I have a second?
Sorry, can I just ask to be clear, does that mean between now and then, if there's any chair official things that need to happen, it will be you? Or do you want to make it like effective tomorrow or?
Oh, good question.
I'm agnostic, I just wanted to bring it up.
Does it
Oh,
come
no,
with
no.
therapy?
Did someone say something? I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
does it come with therapy? Does it chair position?
That's a good question. Carol, do you have a preference of starting like tonight or in 2 weeks?
I would start with the June 2nd meeting.
Okay,
And I second your
Um,
motion.
okay. So that motion was seconded. Did we vote on it yet?
Not
Oh, no,
yet.
we did, because you asked a question. So do I hear a second? I'm going to do that again, just since we are back. Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, congratulations, Carol. Okay, so this next, I love moving these agenda items. So the next agenda item is AP billing signature approval. So one of the tasks is that you then become the signer of approving of funds. I think we have to also make that an official act. I make a motion that Carol Hayes, upon assuming the chair of the Board of Health, become the AP billing signature signer. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
I,
Okay. Oh, the vote will be required annually at May meeting with the same qualifications. Oh, oh,
Right here.
What does it say?
Let me see if I can get the, let me see if I can get this.
Spelled my name wrong.
Oh, that's it, doesn't count it.
okay, so,
50 PPP.
okay, so John, can you send that back and say the word that this will be effective? Mm,
What does it say?
June,
It's basically-
What's her name?
Hayes, not Haynes.
Oh.
Yeah, say, we'd like her name spelled correctly, and, is this, who generated this? Did our office generate this?
yes, yes.
Okay, so, I mean, yeah, so she's going to be chair effective June 2nd, so we'll need to just revise some of those dates and the spelling of her name, that's all.
You wanna change your name?
No, I don't want to.
Okay, so that will have to move, to, a quick agenda item on June 2nd as well. Okay, meeting minutes, our favorite part of the meeting. Now, so I'm curious, are we gonna be, editing our meeting minutes, as a YouTube portion of this meeting?
I don't think anyone would want to watch that.
Yeah, that's where I'm like,
Is
there a way to send them? Yeah,
I
What's
think you'd
happening
have
here,
to
though?
adjourn.
yeah.
yes.
This is
Yes,
the most fascinating part of the meeting.
the meeting minute review?
Yes. People
No,
are
it's
staying up
not.
late to watch the.
Our hardcore fans want to see
Okay.
it.
The only reason I
So-
came.
So how do we want to, again, for all the folks watching, this is our first run through, so we're still figuring it out. How do we want to take up the editing of, or the approval of our meeting minutes, which does usually require we do some editing? How do we want to do that without it being part of the YouTube viewing process?
Well, these are all on the screen.
I don't think.
I don't really have a problem with it personally. If people were here in person, we wouldn't ask them
Yeah.
to leave.
Yeah,
We just do
Okay,
it at the end.
okay.
Put a link at the end.
That's just my
Okay.
viewpoint.
I would just
Okay.
wear sunglasses and just skies.
Okay, so let's put up the one that's the furthest away, which I guess is the March 24th.
What?
I forget. We'll do this with this.
Let's see what this. All right.
Use this. Let me show you, so,
Since I'm already here.
let's see, so let me put this up on screen.
So why did they remove minutes from older meetings?
Well, we have to approve them.
Oh, it's gonna become public records. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Public records until it's approved.
I see, okay.
There, is it there? Yeah. And we can see it now?
Yes.
Yeah. Also, something like.
Yeah.
Oh,
I forgot that we gave Ethan the initials of hand.
where am I, HA? What is,
Oh, that's how it is on here. Is that not what it's supposed to be?
what did it say?
HA,
Yeah, we call you Ha.
Oh, hand. I keep kosher.
Exactly.
This is March 20. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the approved revised. I have the draft where he was still here.
Oh, well.
Okay.
All right.
Maybe you look at me, Ham.
She's never come back to a meeting, you know.
What's her name, Haynes?
Yeah, Haynes, yes, that's me.
Hayes, right?
Hayes,
Yes.
Hayes.
She's changing it though.
Oh, good. All good.
Just what date was this meeting?
This is the March meeting.
So just to be clear, because I can't remember what the exchange was, it has in here under the EHIR that it was agreed that the grease trap would be inspected once construction had begun.
Mhm.
I'd forgotten if it was that or like when it was done, or was it both? Cause I thought there was a discussion that if we looked at it beforehand, things could change. That's why I wasn't sure if it was at the end or during.
Well, he's gonna ask us to do before they do the work on it. We have to go out there and inspect it. We shut first thing. Before it starts,
Before it starts.
before it starts.
Before
yes.
construction starts.
Yes,
Okay. So this says once construction has been done.
yes, that's exactly it.
So that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
I just couldn't remember what was discussed.
EHIR's environmental health impact.
Mhm.
report.
I know, I read the one for Glen Ellen a couple of times.
That's right.
Oh, Matt, this is a random question, but not really. Have you been sworn in?
I did that Tuesday, I believe.
Okay,
Signed
great,
it.
great.
You asked them.
That is a good point. That's good to get in the meeting.
Yes, because you can't be helping with this unless you're an official member.
Oh, I see your point, yeah.
Did they spell your name correctly?
I wanna get a ham after my name.
I'll give it to you. That was an exciting topic.
I think that's the only change, so seems great. The motion was made by member Hayes, seconded by member Fuller to approve Board of Health to hire consultant TRC group for initial evaluation. I was voting unanimously to hire TRC group for initial.
Right. That did happen.
So it did, yeah. I think that was the only
Yes.
change, right?
So actually, yeah, so this is the whole purpose of this review of the meeting minutes, is to put that paragraph back in.
Okay.
So it's there.
Right,
I think everything else is not changed.
right. Okay, so going back to that paragraph, if my memory serves me correctly, Heather said that when we had the meeting, for some reason, we deleted that. And
Yeah.
so Heather put it back in. And the question is, do we need to vote on putting it back in, or do we believe that we can just put it back in?
I would say we can just put it back in. We're not changing anything. Trying to think of the right way to say that, because we are changing this.
We accidentally.
We're not making
deleted
any
it, so we gotta
decisions.
put it back in.
Yeah, we're not making decisions. We're just updating a document. I think that's.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
okay, so I make a motion that we approve the Board of Health meeting minutes of March 24th, 2025 as amended. Do I have a second?
second,
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye. Okay. Next is April 7.
So is it a monthly?
This one, and this for this one. It's a better stuff.
Mhm. So who writes it up? Okay,
She gets a report.
okay, and then she kind of.
Yeah, and it's, what was it, April
So what's
7th?
that
April
now, like
7th.
AI actually? It's kind of interesting.
Save it from a second. And I can use that. I can use the one too.
Yeah, I'm kind of
Don't press any of these
reflexively
X buttons here, because
Uh,
the program is telling me.
resistant.
Okay. I'm learning that, I'm like, whoa,
Wait, what's going on?
and then go down here and
Share.
The height, yeah. Soon this will come to sun. Yeah. April 23.
April 23rd.
Hey, John, you got a PhD then?
Yeah, I know. April 23rd, why is that April 23rd now? Because it was.
It's under this.
It was under 7, wasn't it 7?
Oh, you're
We
It
looked
right.
at
says
it.
April 7th.
It says, so the.
That's a good point. I didn't realize that, but that's what I opened and it says 23rd. But what's
So
the
we opened
23rd?
so.
23rd also says 23rd.
Wait, when was it?
Opened it.
April 7, we're looking for April 7.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the document saved under the file April 7th is April 23rd.
Oh,
Was there a meeting?
But they are different.
So April
Okay.
23rd, we
So-
opened up the April 7th there, it said 23rd, now.
I think it's got the wrong date because if you
So
look, the
April
one,
23rd,
so the
that's,
file titled April 7th has a 605 RGE drinking water is the first thing. If you open the file called April 23rd, its first thing is 601 health update. So I think they're correct. It's just what was written into the header essentially is incorrect.
So the April 7th, we just
Yeah,
gotta
April
change the date
7th,
on it.
because-
I think so.
wait a minute, so we were right with April,
Go back to that
it
one.
was wrong somehow.
We just gotta change the date is wrong. This is.
And even further
We
down the
want-
document,
This is wrong.
So we
It's
wanna
that-
change it now,
at
right
April
here?
7th, yeah.
Maybe you should change it now, okay, so that might be.
it even
easier
says in the
than getting
first
it into-
sentence, we opened the meeting on April 7th. So I think it's just the header.
And what about this here?
Alright, let's. Alright, let's share our screen again.
And this guy, yeah, hopefully. Stab him there, hopefully.
Share. Okay, everybody's seeing that?
I forgot the glory of this meeting when you made me share it for about 7 minutes.
Oh, that's right.
fond
That's-
memories, right, Matt? Fond memories.
Wait, let me take.
You still ran for the seat.
I know, right? Yeah, that's what they were trying to do, just get me to not do that.
It's still showing up there, I just did wrong. Just kidding.
And you get this out of here, take this,
You just gotta hit that word thing.
so you want to do this? Wait a minute, so. Yeah, so.
This is gonna go viral on YouTube.
Uh,
So.
It will pick out the
Yeah.
moose migration from Norway.
I think people are watching on YouTube.
They should be.
They should be.
I'm a PhD.
They could be. I think they should be.
That's probably why you think he's there.
Yeah, I know. Probably.
Yeah.
Alright,
Serious.
Yeah.
April 7th. We can do this.
So,
Oops.
let's see, under the 605,
Alright.
second line, it says to make sure that it is or is not a public health concern. I think we should just reword that to sort of investigate if there's a public health concern or something like
Can you
that.
make it larger?
Alright.
It's going
Much better.
Right, so-
Yeah, so the end of the second sentence.
Sure.
Drinking water temperature consultant.
now. We can do this.
So you wanna change it to address potential public health concerns?
Something like that, just something that's more clear to make sure it is or it's not.
And
Actually, address might not be right, it might be investigate.
Yes, it's right, not address.
feel health concerned.
And then H.
And advise the board on how to proceed.
Also just the heading, discussions bold, in the bold, put a C after S, please. Temporary Fuller, Chair Fuller moved and Chair Jikar. What did I do?
What did you do?
Did I second?
You must have seconded.
Yeah,
But if you were
No,
chair,
No, Haynes seconded.
yeah,
Because you had stepped out.
yeah,
so-
she stepped
Well,
up. She was
she
there.
did step out, but when she came back, we didn't immediately pass it over. We finished what we were doing and then we
Right.
passed.
right. Right.
Actually, sure if you did or who did it. Sure, Heather would love to go back and listen.
But then the next sentence it says, Chair Fuller moved and Hayes member seconded and voted unanimously. I'll put the position back
That's
to,
the thing is
okay.
I just don't know. It could have been different for the previous, I'm unsure.
I would correct it to Haynes.
So do we want to have confirmation of what I did versus guessing?
Technically, we should just verify.
Okay, so I just make this yellow
Okay.
so that Heather can check and see whether or not
Yeah, that's a good idea.
her
The
vote.
other thing is, after the word table. Wait,
Voted to table vote. We did table vote.
we did table a vote, I guess is what we did. I was thinking it was the topic in general, but that is more specific. So on 707, I think we should also, last sentence, change it from determine if to, I think investigate's probably the right word.
Oh. That was a PND. He just got demoted.
Yeah, there you go.
That's better. I think it's a well specialist, not a water specialist. Right, John?
What's that?
Glenn Ayers is a well specialist, not a water specialist. That makes a difference.
It does make a difference.
Yeah,
Well, specialist or
Yeah.
water specialist, or well, water specialist.
no, just well.
Okay.
Well, yeah, right, well,
New well regulations, not water regulations. A new well regulation or new well regulations, one of the two.
S, yeah, there should be S there.
We're gonna change them all.
And then in the sentence include, you can take off that comma between include and grandfathering. And then we can move it to the end of geothermal, that's that comma. Okay, great, thank you.
And under the meeting minutes, Jai Carr's last name has an extra E in the middle three.
Oh,
Ah, yes, which the computer actually caught. It's interesting.
That is interesting, yeah.
so that's what I mean.
Wow, we really banged out the meeting minutes, that meeting. Okay.
that's-
Actually, Carol, do you wanna lead the way on this one?
Well, we can't vote for it. We gotta get this checked. the yellow
Oh, that's a good point,
portion
yeah.
Checked.
Yeah.
So we need to get this reviewed and then we will address it on the next. meeting.
Okay. So we're gonna use the recording for Heather to know that she needs to come back to April 7th and verify whatever happened in that particular motion, correct?
Does that mean the YouTube listeners have to come back?
You're gonna have to wait till the next meeting.
June 2nd, stay tuned.
That's our best.
Okay, we're almost there. almost there.
Open, make it bigger. There it goes.
Okay, 6:15, Board of Health requested 2 additional conditions and it was agreed by all to add them to the HIR. I'd like that flushed out. I believe we did I'd like what those conditions are. Unless we have them somewhere else on this document.
It's the next paragraph.
Oh, it is, okay.
Motion, second, Chair Blank was voting
No.
yes, areas from the applicants from section 112.
Okay, so, okay, fabulous. So, it was agreed by all to add them to the EHR. Can we clean up that sentence a little bit then? So did we agree or did we, approve? Requested 2 additional conditions, maybe just parentheses, see below?
See next paragraph. Better to say see next paragraph.
Yeah, or see this paragraph, right?
Allow a decrease in the rate of the volume of stormwater runoff overall project area. This instead of and.
Yeah.
Consistent with Massachusetts stormwater handwater and stormwater design standards.
Stormwater handwork or handbook.
Handbook. Handbook. Regulations.
Handwork was more interesting.
All right, Glenn. One hour and.
Yes.
Right. Full plan.
Period.
I don't know if this is necessary.
It's a little redundant.
Well, yeah, I was curious if for the next part, if we wanted to put in something like consistent with the 2024 season or something, that way if people look back, they know that we were sort of continuing in a way.
Something for
Some variation.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever seen it like a development pool with a lifeguard before. Yeah, like everywhere that I've lived, it's not cool, they have it.
Massachusetts person.
Interesting.
Okay.
So post conditions.
I guess one question I have here is. I can't remember exactly how it went down. I thought that we had actually approved this with the more advanced purification system, and then it was requested that we change it to what's in there now, which is like an appropriate system or something. Is that how it happened? And if so, do we need to make note of that? Cause I think what we did is we sort of amended the first motion, maybe?
Yeah, but there were, it was like too specific because it might
Yeah.
cause.
Yeah, so I know it's semantics, I just didn't know exactly how to, if and how it
This is
needed
the
to be
final
captured.
motion.
Is the final motion fine?
I'm fine with the final
Okay.
motion, because this is what was decided. Like we edited our,
Can I ask you a question about that? Was it a decision that additional,
well, he first said he was gonna get like a reverse osmosis system is
Right.
really like the highest grade level,
right,
whatever, and they're like, oh, that's great, okay, so. We were gonna put that in with the reverse
Right.
osmosis, but you don't need to say what type of system, cause.
Well, he was also concerned about
Lowest-
resale or something.
Yeah, like,
When lowest
if
the,
we put in a minute. to-
Yeah, because it gives the
Like some
impression,
only
right,
did it.
that it's,
so this approval is only for during their ownership? Right?
No, this just says you need a filter system.
Was I saying, but as long as they own the property, they have to maintain that system? Or is that not even discussed? I'm trying to remember.
I don't remember that part, that portion of it being discussed.
In our general well regulations for the drinking water, do we require homeowners to have high, let's say PFAS, high, like levels of certain chemicals? Do we require them to do testing and have certain filtration systems? I don't think.
John, what do you,
There.
John, you would know. I don't.
yeah, I think he said he was gonna do it himself.
No, I
He
remember that.
wanted
Yeah.
to do it himself, cause it promotes filtration for all those kids and stuff like
Right,
that.
no, I guess my question is this, let's say he decides, oh, I don't like it anymore, you know, the water tastes funny or whatever.
right, can,
I wanna drink that PFAS, it's so good.
Yeah, like really, I want to add it to my Cheerios.
Yeah,
Is he required to maintain that?
I don't think there's
No,
any.
presently, I don't think, because our well regulations don't do it yet.
No, but from the way the motion was written. Or was there, I mean, yeah, the motion was written. Second test is complete and furnished. Must be a backflow preventer. And then, see, that has to be there all the time. You can't,
The backflows for the irrigation.
I
part as
understand,
well.
yeah, yeah, an appropriate water purification system, well, it says be installed. Proof is demonstrated, what above has been completed.
But we don't require them to say, change the filter or ever maintain it. Like,
I'm
it's
just
gotta
asking.
Be there.
Yeah, or does it, okay, I mean, this is whatever it was, I'm just
Yeah.
curious how that, if he decides that he doesn't like it. For whatever reason, or he doesn't want to maintain it,
I would argue he has to get a different variance then, because he's no longer in compliance
Yeah.
with this.
yeah, okay.
Cause that wouldn't be appropriate water filtration device.
Maybe we're saying that's the continuity in what we.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Next schedule. Which is
Which
not
is
June.
this one.
Okay.
So that's true.
YouTube. There's thousands watching right now.
You never know, we'll find out when we get home, we have the little,
Yeah.
no kid, control thing.
If people will start writing to you, John.
Yeah, tell exactly.
We watched this famous times on the street, and there's never more than like 300 people watching. I highly doubt we're more interesting than Bourbon Street.
Bourbon Street.
Yes. In New Orleans.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There was a
Wow.
piece in the paper the other day that said the moose migration in Norway or Sweden or Finland was viral. You used to see like a moose or two every few hours. This might overtake
I was
it.
gonna say, we have items. I mean, we did have Wendy, if we're ever gonna do it, it's probably with her.
That's true, that's true.
Imagine if we go home and it's 1 million people on.
Maybe
Like,
it's kind
whoa, and then they say PFAS. Well, like, PFAS comments, and all the comments, like 10 pages, 10, no.
Whatever you do, don't say climate change.
You never know.
Soon we're not gonna be able to study PFAS either.
That's true too. There are thousands, if not millions. We see the PhD report from Floating Hills. That just doesn't sound right.
Public health director,
No, that sounds right.
Yeah, but you know,
But the
I guess it's
PhD
there.
report is a little different,
Yeah,
like
I
the
know.
dissertation.
Yeah, I know. It does.
Dissertation every month.
Please see the dissertation for.
That's why I got a call from Harvard the other night because they saw this. They said, hey, we should be on that. I will.
When are you defending your dissertation?
Could be, yeah, every month.
Every month?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we good with this one?
I'm good.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes for April 23rd, 2025 for the Board of Health. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Are you chair yet?
No.
Okay.
Haynes?
Okay, we've already set our next meeting, subject to John doing the research on whether the room is available or if we need to move it in that week. So if Heather emails you, pay attention and send that back so we can get our meeting set ASAP. Okay, anybody have any questions? Want to put anything out before we close this meeting?
One question, it looks like there's a couple different versions of the regulations. Do we want to choose one that everyone will work on, whatever you want to call it? You can even tell us later, it doesn't have to be the second.
Yeah, there's like several versions in the
Yes,
Dropbox.
that's why I called-
Regulation, there's like one, two,
Right.
final, one final, two.
And John, that's why I called you this
Oh, yeah.
afternoon, saying like, which one am I working on?
Yeah, so maybe you can just pick one.
Yeah.
Which one are we doing?
Well, I took the one that I gave, the one that I sent you was that final version with my additions. That was
Right,
the
it's
second.
on there with Ethan on the.
Yeah, but that doesn't, we just have to make it clear so that everyone knows which is the latest version.
Yeah, so I don't
Okay,
work
so
on
We
one
could
final.
change it to June.
Or just say, yeah,
Or what,
yeah.
Yeah, just put June 2nd meeting.
or yeah.
So that's yours, wasn't it? It's
That was the last
finalized
version.
that we're gonna be working on again.
Yeah, I think we go off what the most recent version Ethan worked on, we can adjust from there.
And that was early this afternoon that I sent to you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would make sense. Because it was not clear to me when I went on earlier today. It's like, what am I reading here?
Okay, I make a motion that we close the May 21st, 2019, excuse me, 2025 Board of Health meeting. Do I have a second?
Right?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Everyone's gonna watch this.
They're having too much of a good time, Jake. It's like,
What'd you say?
they're having too much of a good time. You should join
I
them.
know, I know. Well, then they'll get to watch themselves have a good time too. That's what's,
Up in the sky, you're like flying over the air over us.
I did it on purpose. That's why I stayed home. I did it on purpose. Not. I was like, I didn't get the party invitation. You guys are all there.
Hey, when I come, it's so cool in
We
here.
had a police detail to keep the crowds away.
Yeah. They're very effective. They kept everyone away.
I know. Well, on this side of it, I watch all of you kind of looking up to the sky like you're.
Oh, it's over there, so we're not even looking at the camera.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you.
There is something up there.
Uh,
Oh, my God.
Okay. So how do we stop the YouTube process now?
You gotta gotta turn off some.
I think.
I know, I can turn around, I turn out here, then I.
I would imagine when you stop the meeting, it ends up.
Yeah, I take it off here. Yeah. So you ready to go, or?
Yeah, it's off, it's over.
All right, have a great night, everyone. And watch out for the storm tomorrow. Big storms, careful. See you later.
Go look for the foam, go out for the foam afterwards.
All right.
That's really interesting.
Oh, I know, I'm not kidding.
I'll
Anyway,
I'll
good
send you
night,
one of the-
everybody.